Chapter 161. Sorry, Clark. Mom, what's wrong? With his younger brother safe, there was no reason to worry about the farm. Jonathan sat lightly watching TV in the living room while Martha washed dishes. When the wave of psionic energy swept through the city, both Green Lantern rings on their hands suddenly flared. Their rings' self-preservation protocols activated, shielding their minds from the invading psionic influence. Jonathan, focused on the comedian on TV, didn't even notice the glow. Martha, standing at the sink, was startled by the sudden flash. Her hand trembled, a plate slipped and shattered on the floor. "Nothing, my ring just lit up and scared me," she said, clutching her chest with relief and bending to pick up the pieces. "Mom, let me," David said. He waved a hand. The shards flew up and deposited themselves neatly into the kitchen bin. Seeing his parents unharmed relaxed him. It had been the right decision to take 2 lantern rings from the Guardians and give them to Mom and Dad for protection. Without them, even with the Dionysus factor in their bodies preventing lethal harm, the citywide surge of hatred could have left them with ugly memories: blows, curses, knives, guns. He looked at his father's glowing ring. "David, this ring." Jonathan hesitated. Their son had said the rings had an automatic defense that detected attacks. It should have triggered now, but there was no one in the house. "Someone used some means to mess with the minds of Metropolis," David said. "The whole city's in chaos." David tuned his senses outward. The psionic pirate's mental power was vast, but by spreading it across millions of people, it became diffuse. He could inflame a city's emotions, but he couldn't break the lantern ring's protections or David's own mental barrier, at least not easily. David scanned outward with remote gravity field sensing, and colorless, silent images congealed in his mind. The mental wave was still sweeping, and the pattern showed an expanding circle. The center would be where the anomaly began. There, he locked onto the origin. The one who started this had to be there. "Stay here," he told his parents. "I'll handle it." He launched from the house and streaked toward downtown Metropolis, breaking the sound barrier. He flew over the city and finally hovered above a bank. People everywhere were behaving oddly, except for one man inside who floated with eyes closed, radiating waves of psionic energy. Closer to him, David saw someone he knew standing motionless, Clark, engaged in whatever the pirate had forced him to do. Here the mental pressure hit hardest. Even David could feel it now, battering at his mental defenses. A bat-shaped jet cut across the sky. Batman piloted it. Flash rode with him and Cyborg flew at the jet's flank. Batman had scanned the city and found the source. The Justice League had mobilized. Cyborg flew to David and warned, voice grave, "Overman, Superman is in the bank. He looks controlled." David didn't need to be told. He already knew Clark was in trouble. He ripped the bank roof off with an invisible hand and peered in. "Flash, stop the rioting in the streets." Batman barked as he dropped the heavy Fenrir armor from the hovering jet. Flash nodded and was gone in a red streak, time dilating in his view as he gentle-handed bullets out of barrels, knocked bats aside, tripped potential attackers, and when necessary, struck to render people unconscious. He was the best bet to stop the city's violence before anyone else died. Inside the bank, the psionic pirate had been surveying the scene with a smug smile. The city was indeed almost entirely covered. He hadn't tried to control Batman, Flash, or Cyborg. He planned something grander. David, too, would be turned, and then the League would be made to tear itself apart. The idea of famous heroes annihilating one another amused him. He unfurled a tsunami of mental force toward David. David, who had been searching for the pirate's location, felt the attack like a tug and turned, eyes narrowing. The wave hit his defenses and scattered like spray against bronze. His 6 gods' power and Achilles' invulnerability were not just physical protections, they fortified his mind. The psionic blow had little effect. Furious, the pirate pushed harder, unleashing a world-shattering mental assault. A prickling crawled at David's cortex, but he shook it off and swung a fist that carried wind and thunder. The blast melted a corner of the bank into molten metal. The pirate's face went pale. He had assumed he could at least slow this Overman down. He hadn't expected such resilience. The pirate's confidence snapped. He switched tactics and poured everything into blinding, confusing illusions. Vast, illusory mists veiled the bank, and David felt an insubstantial stutter as if the world had slipped. The psionic pirate vanished and reappeared across the street, grinding his teeth and struggling to focus. The simplest invisibility had taken more of his strength than he liked. If David's mind had been anything but chiefly defensive, he'd be an even scarier foe. Cyborg and Batman scanned the area with infrared and sensors, but found nothing. The pirate's blinding trick had left them blind too. Now, with David momentarily disoriented, the pirate made his boldest move. He reached into Clark's head and exposed the most tender things: David's family, his vulnerabilities. Clark, eyes wide with sudden horror and fury, lunged. "Brainiac, let go of my brother," he shouted as he slammed into David at the waist. The collision was like a freight train. The bank's counters and furniture exploded outward as the two closed. David, grabbed, felt Clark's rage-driven strength push him skyward. He saw, clearly now, what the pirate had done. He draped illusions over Clark's senses, made him think he was defending his little brother from a monstrous enemy. Clark didn't know the monster he was trying to hurl into space was David, because only David could survive this. David cursed the pirate's intrusion. Clark's memories had been pried open. His knowledge of family and identities had probably been spread across the pirate's mind. He had to act fast. "Shazam!" he shouted. A bolt of divine lightning answered and struck down. For an instant, David's face flickered. He reverted to a younger mortal guise, and that strike hit Clark full on. Clark's skin steamed, his eyes rolled back, and the uncontrollable rage that powered him blinked out as lightning shocked him into unconsciousness. David fell out of his mortal guise and immediately surged back into his powered form, catching Clark before he could plummet. "Sorry, Clark," he muttered, grim but urgent. He knew why the word worked. The Six Gods' power had a trump card, the divine lightning invoked by shouting Shazam. It was one of the strongest moves he could use, but it left the human behind it vulnerable in the brief transition. David, however, had the strength of gods even without that risk. He reached out with invisible fingers. Gravity nullification. He ripped the gravity from a wide area. People and objects rose, floating like balloons. The newer fusion of his powers had given him more precise control, and he used it to yank Flash, Batman, Cyborg, and civilians into the air, anything the pirate might use as leverage. The two parents in his small hometown had resisted a bit, but he had already solved that. For a cruel instant, the pirate thought he could still escape. Then David slammed the other end of the lever down. "Supergravity field," he intoned. What followed felt apocalyptic. David pushed down with the force of a god. Gravity collapsed in on itself and then hammered outward like a sledge. Skyscrapers folded and crumpled as if made of paper. Asphalt pulverized. Cars were flattened into unreadable scrap. The ground sank, compressed into something as hard as iron, and the sound was a colossal roar that rolled for miles. Flash, mid-run, stopped and turned. Dust and a rising crater rushed toward him. In an instant, as if divine wrath had descended, everything on the ground, in several miles, ceased to be. Chapter 162, Redemption, Meeting the Beyonder. What happened? Cyborg's eyelids twitched. He had never seen Overman like this before. Cold and decisive as he usually was, this was the first time David had acted with such ruthless finality. The area of the attack covered miles, whole blocks leveled. Bruce Wayne said nothing, but his expression showed he had already formed a hypothesis. Anyone who could dominate the minds of an entire city probably had the ability to peer into minds as well. For heroes, secret identities were fragile things. Down in a pit dozens of meters deep, Psionic Pirate had been forced to his knees by the crushing impact. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. The Medusa mask he'd been using to generate a psionic barrier was cracked. Gravity is tied to space-time. Ordinary force fields and energy shields couldn't hold against it. Mental powers were an exception, but fighting that mountain of weight left him unable to concentrate enough to maintain his invisibility. He gagged, wildly trying to rebuild the shield. "Not dead yet," David called from above. With a flick of his wrist, he let loose a bolt of lightning. The psionic barrier shattered like glass on the verge of collapse. "I surrender." Psionic Pirate's voice wavered, desperate. He clawed at the fragments of his shield, pleading for mercy. But David's face was hard. The gravity didn't lift. It pressed like a mountain. David's killing intent was absolute, something Cyborg had almost never seen directed at any living thing. You think I'd let you live after what you know? David said. The last bits of the psionic shield cracked and imploded. Psionic Pirate listened to the sound like a death knell. Terror swept through him. Batman, Cyborg, are you going to stand there while Overman kills me? Does your Justice League claim the right to execute criminals who've surrendered? No one among them had the right to kill an untried, surrendered criminal. Cyborg's face flickered with conflict. By rights, he should have stopped David. But he remembered how he had not stopped David when Calabac died, and how part of him had even been relieved. Who was he to speak now? Batman didn't move. You're too dangerous. If you're allowed to live, today could repeat itself. Countless more people could be harmed. The scale of the attack, millions driven to madness and chaos, meant the death toll might rival or exceed Brainiac's previous assault. They had no reliable means to subdue David if he chose not to be restrained. Psionic Pirate, cornered and furious, tried one last gambit. I know your identity, Dave. It was too late. A crushing force descended. He was flattened, instantly, into a bloody smear at the bottom of the pit. The gore made Cyborg look away. Clark came to, hovering awkwardly in the air. He stared down at the jagged hole in the city and then turned to David, shaken. I was controlled. Don't worry, you didn't hurt anyone, David said, already calm. He reached out and the cracked Medusa mask the pirate had worn floated into his hand. It glowed when the pirate used his power. It hadn't broken under the supergravity. David turned it over thoughtfully. The mask clearly had special properties. An artifact, possibly dangerous. He considered pocketing it, but shook his head. This won't be kept in my collection, he told them. Conscious items, things that actively tempted or corroded the mind, were too dangerous to keep at home. What if his parents saw it and were seduced, breaking through the Lantern Ring's mental defenses? Better to deliver it to Paradise Island's treasury and let the Amazons guard it, like the Mother Box. With the instigating culprit dead, David left. He had finished the hardest part of the day and had no interest in tying up every loose end. Was this Overman? Flash arrived in a blur as David was already departing. He looked at the cratered city blocks in stunned silence. He solved the crisis again, but he left us with this mess. Cyborg stared at several square miles of vanished neighborhoods and felt a headache coming. How would they explain this to the municipal government? Tens of thousands were suddenly homeless, livelihoods gone. I think most people will be grateful, Flash guessed, scratching his head. After all, Overman had saved Metropolis. If not for him, who knew how many more would have died? Even Superman had been controlled. Batman wasn't so sure. His voice was flat. I hope so. He shifted his gaze to Clark. Are you all right, Superman? Clark looked down at the corpse in the pit and then at his friends. I'm fine. He was rattled. His identity had been threatened, his parents exposed, he'd been controlled, but no one had been killed because of him. If not for David, today might have ended very differently. After David left, the League members who had returned in haste contained the rioting and prevented further casualties. When citizens regained their senses and surveyed the devastation, the ruined buildings, the shattered streets, a shared relief swept the city. The horror of what they had done in irrational stupor felt like a nightmare. For days afterward, families, economies, and the legal system would be clogged with problems the city had to solve on its own. The Justice League could do little but help where possible. Metropolis had not hated a single person as deeply as it did that day. Psionic Pirate's shadow almost rivaled Brainiac's for sheer scale of impact, and in some ways his attack had been worse. Yet at the same time, the city was grateful to Overman for stopping it. A small, loud contingent of citizens who had lost everything was angry at Overman. But that didn't last. A house-sized ingot of gold fell from the sky into the plaza in front of City Hall, bearing an inscription that it was for disaster relief and compensation, and the crowd's anger evaporated. Generous payouts far exceeded most people's losses. Smiles returned. Overman, previously condemned as indifferent, was now praised as decisive, wise, benevolent. Back at the warehouse, Clark couldn't hide his disbelief. David, how did you do that? Where did you get all that money? Even Bruce is not that rich. The golden mass in the plaza converted to hundreds of billions of dollars, comparable to the Wayne family fortune amassed across generations. Batman simply remained silent when he saw it. David leaned against the second-floor wall under the night sky, arms folded. "If you knew more about mineralogy, you wouldn't ask," David said. "Over 99% of accessible gold is in the Earth's crust. I took a chunk from the mantle and shaped it. If you want, I can give you one 10 times larger tomorrow." As king of Atlantis, with access to supertech resources, he could muster more wealth than most earthly leaders. He'd just been too lazy to go to Atlantis for it. Clark shook his head, understanding. This time it wasn't just theatrics, Clark said, remembering the online fallout. That church, First Redemption, finally put something out. In the Justice League Hall, Cyborg projected dozens of news articles. "It's late. It's been half a month since Metropolis erupted, and they've only now released a story from a month ago. They didn't want to go head-to-head with Overman for headlines." Hal Jordan lounged with a teasing look at David. Batman had already briefed the assembled members about the possible danger Redemption posed. Flash and others had long suspected something odd. The Yazir incident had happened before Black Adam, yet the First Redemption Church had only publicized it long after the Metropolis riots, timing that suggested strategy. Diana added in a low voice that Hippolyta had inspected the mask David deposited on Paradise Island. "My mother couldn't find its origin either. It's not of the gods, just an ancient, powerful magical artifact. Its seductive effect is inherent and can't be removed." David nodded. The mask amplified psionic power and tempted those with weak minds. Psionic pirates' desire to remake the world had likely been amplified by it. Magic, after all, preceded the gods in their cosmology, older, stranger, and often far more dangerous. Even artifacts could be catalysts for catastrophe. Once it was out, the redemption story dominated the headlines, Cyborg said. His tone was wary. "Someone powerful is pushing this." "The First Redemption Church takes donations from wealthy patrons worldwide," Batman said. He knew how money could shape politics. Now the whole world knows about him. Arthur, watching a blue projected avatar of redemption, said softly, "They have many devout followers. How much power does that give him?" All the others looked troubled. Clark felt the weight of it most personally. After Brainiac, Black Adam, and Psionic Pirate, he knew how quickly cascading crises could overwhelm them. "One person's power is small," he said, "but gather millions and we could be helpless." David, who'd been summoned to the hall, raised an eyebrow. "He hasn't done anything yet. Why the panic?" "Actually," Batman and Cyborg said together, the data processors of the League, their next move might already be public. Cyborg projected a statement from the First Redemption Church. It called Psionic Pirate's mask a diabolical artifact that tempted people towards sin and disaster, and formally requested the League hand the mask over to the church for safekeeping. All eyes turned to David. They knew he had taken the mask. He smirked faintly. "The mask does tempt people. I've tested it. If someone's mental strength is weak, the mask reaches them. Maybe only those with the potential for wide harm sense its pull." "So you'll give it to them?" Hal asked, half teasing. "No." Batman's reply was immediate and firm. "Absolutely not." Clark and the others stared at him. "A mind-bending artifact and a church that gathers followers, what do you think that could become?" Batman tapped the table. The expression in the room changed. "With that mask, the First Redemption Church could unify the world under one faith in a few years," Batman said. Cyborg, who lived on the networks, pointed out another oddity. If the church wanted headlines, it hadn't exploited its own statement to the fullest. That suggested they didn't want a broad publicity surge. David thought about it, then smiled. The church wouldn't expect him to hand over a dangerous artifact based on a web post. They'd follow up with action. He'd just been thinking it through when the hall's alert chimed. A new official email, projected in the center of the round table, appeared from the First Redemption Church. "Overman," it read, "Redemption requests a meeting with you on the grasslands next to the country of Yasir in Africa." Cyborg swallowed. Everyone looked toward David. The meeting request was direct, no intermediaries. The League watched their most unpredictable ally and the most dangerous new religious movement point at each other across a map of the world. Chapter 163, Don't Force Me, Transcendent. The First Redemption Church had sent a message. Redemption, seen by billions of Catholics as God's messenger, wanted to meet Overman, the man who had saved the world more than once, to discuss custody of the psionic pirate's mask. The chosen meeting place, an open, endless prairie. No buildings to damage, no cameras. If anything happened, it would be the best place for a fight. Aquaman shook his head. The location felt ominous. Maybe he just wants to keep the mask safe, he suggested, just in case. Flash flinched, offering the possibility quietly. The others were less sanguine. Batman, who trusted nobody, tapped the table. Under no circumstances should that mask be given to him. He knew the mask had been sent back by David to Diana's Amazon island, and he trusted the Amazons, who had guarded the Apocalypse mother box for centuries, more than a suddenly prominent figure called Redemption. The first Redemption Church, beyond the leader's fame, was just a sect propped up by wealthy backers, with no real power to protect something as dangerous as the mask. I've tracked down clues on a pastor named Hai-Tuo-Hua, Batman said. He once described surviving a meat grinder battlefield in a sermon. Given his age, it most likely points to World War II. Cyborg frowned. Give me time. I might be able to dig up his background. A priest who'd fought in World War II, David remembered they'd discussed it last time. There wasn't much to investigate about Redemption. His life story was easy to verify through neighbors, teachers, classmates. Gerard, a simple man, had been transformed into Redemption by a mysterious figure with no past. That unseen figure, Hai-Tuo-Hua, had found a scrap of gold in the dirt and molded it into a deity. His origins were suspicious. The meeting is tomorrow morning, Hal Jordan said. He'd previously been indifferent to the redemption issue. He tended not to worry about what hadn't happened yet. But Redemption's rise could change the world. A single mysterious rendezvous over an object that could inflame any zealot. This was dangerous. There was no internet during World War II. Cyborg looked uncomfortable. One day, and a few vague clues weren't much to go on. If Hai-Tuo-Hua's background had been deliberately sealed, it might not show up online at all. It doesn't matter, David said, standing up slowly. No matter who he was, Redemption does what Redemption is told to do. Ultimately, everything came down to strength. David wanted to see how far Redemption's influence and power had grown. If nothing unexpected happened tomorrow, a fight might erupt between the two strongest men present, and in that fight, no one could intervene. The quiet night pressed in. Starlight streamed through the church's glass. Inside the First Redemption Church, Jared, Redemption, knelt before the pulpit in a blue battle suit, chiseled like marble, brows knotted in confusion as he prayed. I know carrying the faith of so many is a heavy burden. An old, gentle voice answered from the lit bedroom at the back. Hai-Tuo-Hua, in a robe with a cup of tea in hand, stepped out. Would you like some tea? Tea calms the mind. No, thank you, Father. Redemption's voice trembled. It's not only expectations. My power has grown to something I can't fathom. I dare not speak loudly, for fear of shattering houses. People, this is worse than Yasir. Last time, a man named Yasir had lost control of a sudden surge of power and vaporized a military base and hundreds of lives. Jared's worry was real. His own abilities had grown so dramatically that his previous reserves now seemed minuscule in comparison, like a rabbit suddenly endowed with an elephant's strength. I'm sorry about Yasir, Hai-Tuo-Hua said slowly, sipping tea. But patience and faith will help you control it. Child, we relied on each other through the worst. Now that the light has dawned, it is the Lord's revelation. Are we so weak as to refuse the Lord's help? We will spread the Lord's glory across the world as long as we obtain that mask, Redemption replied, straightening with a spark of zeal. He saw his powers as divine grace. He and the pastor were chosen instruments. What is this compared to the Lord's test of Abraham and Isaac? Hai-Tuo-Hua smiled softly, and Jared's eyes filled with fervent devotion, ready to be a martyr. The pastor told of his own trial. On a brutal front, ordered to charge a German line, they left tens of thousands dead, and the line stood unbroken. On that freezing, hopeless night, he knelt in the trench and prayed. In his despair, the Lord had looked upon him, and a miracle had occurred. Blue, sacred light blooming between his hands, washing over the battlefield and saving him. He vowed ever since to spread that glory until his dying breath. Tomorrow may be the Lord's test for you, he told Jared, gently. You will not face death like Abraham. Jared trembled with devotion. Father, I understand. I will retrieve that mask. You are the engine. I am the energy. Together we'll change the world. Very well. I will lead the congregation in prayer for you. Blue light rippled from both of them as the night deepened. Dawn on the prairie was blistering. A cool wind moved the waist-high grass. Hyenas, cheetahs, even elephants crossed the plain. Redemption hovered, arms folded, eyes shut. The life field around him made predators cower. Elephants trumpeted and fled at his presence. "You're late," he said when David still didn't appear. "It's been half an hour since our agreed time." David descended from the sky, purple light spilling off him. He wore a purple battlesuit with a golden lightning bolt on his chest like Shazam, a majestic god in midair, hands clasped behind him. "It's a mercy I bothered to come. Did I promise I'd agree to your terms?" A few hundred meters away, Clark, Diana, Batman, and Cyborg landed, expressions hard. "Overman came half an hour late to give me time," David said flatly. "I couldn't find anything on Hai-Tuahua." Cyborg was frustrated. Batman and he both suspected Hai-Tuahua was key. Perhaps his wartime experience had led a government to seal documents about him. "We can only rely on David for now," Batman said. They all watched the two men prepared for the worst. If Redemption had escalated further, they wouldn't be able to help, and David might be facing something he couldn't handle. "Hope he isn't too fast," Hal muttered. "If his speed doesn't exceed mine, I can assist Overman." Flash flexed his wrist. "Where's the mask that attacked Metropolis, Overman?" Redemption opened his eyes and fixed David with a stare. "You must hand it over. It's dangerous." David stayed calm. "Are you treating it as a devil thing that must be sealed, or do you want to use it to further your church's agenda?" "Redemption has changed," Batman said quietly, watching Jared on Cyborg's feed. The hesitancy and kindness he'd once seen were gone. Now he looked like an incited crusader. A warning alarm sounded as Redemption's body flared into enormous blue fire. Energy bled into the prairie, scorching earth and whipping wind. "Hand it over. Don't force me. I cannot control my power now." David barely reacted as the grass near him turned to ash. The heat surged, hundreds of degrees, but to him it was a breeze. Cyborg's system beeped, horrified. "His energy signature exceeds any nuclear reactor on Earth," the sensor warned, numbers climbing off the chart. "Fall back," Cyborg ordered. "We must fall back." "Are we going to watch from the sidelines?" Hal protested, midair. "If you think you can survive a nuclear blast, ignore it," Cyborg snapped, hauling Arthur and retreating. "I can provide remote support. Barry, move back." Green Lantern created a circular platform and lifted Flash. They all retreated to a safer distance. Only three remained forward: Clark, Batman in Fenrir armor, and Diana with her shield. They watched as David and Redemption faced each other, one ready to refuse the mask's surrender, the other bent on taking it. It would come down to who could overpower whom. "Just as I suspected, you intend to use the mask for something else," David said, voice cold. Dark clouds rolled as if in response, lightning crawling from the sky to encircle him. He pulsed with a dazzling divine light, and wind swept the prairie. "I'm not interested in your plans. I won't let you take the mask and cause more harm. I will stop you here." Redemption's roar answered, energy bursting like a sun rising from the ground, tearing a crater around him. He slammed into the air like a comet and launched a furious punch aimed straight at David. Chapter 164. Another Redemption? 4K2. David dove from the sky, his fists charged with world-shaking energy, smashing together with a single deafening boom. The air ruptured as if millions of tons of high explosives had detonated at once. Energy ripples, threaded with lightning, rolled outward like a tidal wave for miles. The ground buckled. Grasslands gave way to a massive crater, chunks of earth rocketing into the air. David hung in the surge of power, unmoved. Redemption stared, surprised that his own rapidly increasing, barely controllable strength hadn't even knocked David off balance. He swung another punch, speed and force tearing through the air with a keening scream. David met it steadily, lightning flaring from his palms. "God doesn't even manage his own kingdom of heaven," David said, voice cold. "Do you think he'll bother with you on a tiny little Earth?" Redemption howled, as if struck by 10,000 bolts. A torrent of blue energy burst from his hand and shoved David back. "You dare insult the Lord," he roared, clutching at David with a gravity field so oppressive it felt like a mountain pressing down. David steadied himself, incredulous at being suppressed by gravity he usually used on others. "Do you think you're the only one who can do that?" he said, expressionless. Then he unleashed his own crushing gravity. Redemption grunted and opened his mouth to blast a searing, deep blue breath, heat like a supervolcano, straight at him. David raised an arm to shield his face, forced back by the onslaught. Even his energy control couldn't absorb it all, and he jammed his body against the remaining force before a gust scattered the last sparks. "I've never seen you use that before," David said, almost conversational. "Is it a beast move? A monster? Afraid it would ruin your credibility as God's messenger? Silence! I am chosen by God!" Redemption snapped, fury flaring across his stern face. He lunged with extreme speed and crashed into David. Their fists and feet, carrying the power to upend worlds, collided like two gods in combat, blowing air in waves for miles. Lightning lanced out, the ground trembling under each strike. "Hand over the mask," Redemption demanded. David called down a streak of lightning that slammed into Redemption and sent him tumbling away. Redemption fired cosmic rays from his eyes. "I didn't bring the mask. It's where it should be," David said, then deflected the beam and launched a counterattack, sending Redemption careening into the sky. The blue flames around Redemption flared brighter, his figure a supernova as he ripped through the clouds and slammed back toward David like a comet, destined to flatten mountains. David tore a swath of earth from the ground, an island-sized slab, and hurled it at Redemption. The other slammed through it as if it were nothing, and when Redemption's vision cleared, David was gone from below and reappeared with blinding speed. He punched Redemption's temple, sending him skidding backward. "You don't have super senses, and your gravity control is crude," David observed. Just the brief obscuring of vision made Redemption lose track of him. Faith, hundreds of millions of Catholics, had long swelled Redemption's power to a level that could contest David, but skill didn't come with raw power. His control was clumsy. A precise manipulation of gravity could topple him like a top-heavy drunk. Redemption smashed into the ground, tearing a small canyon from the impact, then shot back upward, eyes burning. "The Lord watches over me. I will never be defeated," he yelled and dove again. They battered the sky and ground, each clash like two nuclear blasts detonating against one another. Shockwaves tore clouds aside and sent herds scattering, zebras, hyenas, buffalo, many vaporized by stray energy. From a distance, Clark and the others watched in horror. "Is this his limit?" David asked calmly as he tilted his head to avoid a beam that grazed his ear. He unleashed a vast tide of divine lightning, dense and merciless, that struck Redemption. Redemption charged to close and was easily dodged. David grabbed his cape and flung him through a distant mountain range. Now desperate, Redemption unleashed everything he had. Waves of energy rolled out, but they couldn't break David. Even Redemption himself was stunned at how much raw force he'd managed to channel, and how close it still came to parity with David. "Impressive power," David said, "but that's all it is." With gravity thrown off, Redemption lurched like a ship in a storm, his attacks growing erratic and blunt. David exploited each opening, landing heavy blows. Despite the recent surge in Redemption's power, his fighting experience was poor. He might regenerate, but his technique was lacking. One punch sent him skidding several hundred meters, and when he steadied himself and wiped a smear of blood from his mouth, his wounds visibly knitting back. "Accelerated healing?" David supplied. Redemption chuckled coldly. "You surprised again?" he snapped. Even at his weakest, early when the first Redemption Church was founded, he'd never been wounded. No one had ever known of this resurrection-like gift. "I can heal and resurrect like Lazarus. It is God's gift." He lunged again, ferocious and single-minded, unbeatable in his mind because divine conviction made him righteous. He swore he would not stop until he had the mask, determined to spread the Lord's light to the world. A blazing certainty flickered in his eyes. David's face hardly moved. He had read Redemption's history. The man was likely brainwashed and manipulated to become a tool, an evangelist for some larger agenda, much like the historical Crusaders. David had no patience for arguing theology while taking hit after hit. A direct solution was simpler. "Although I don't know who Hai-Tuahua really is," he said, "there are a few things I can do." A coordinate flashed on Cyborg's wrist projection. Hai-Tuahua's location, a secluded small church in Wallace Falls, Yasir's capital. Cyborg hacked through layers of security and interrupted the priest's live broadcast, posting evidence online for those who didn't know the truth. "I've cut the feed and left a message for anyone misled," Cyborg said. "It might help." "Let's go," Batman ordered. The shockwaves rolled on for miles as the group, Hal Jordan, Clark, Diana, Batman, Cyborg, Flash, Aquaman, moved fast. They couldn't stand idle. Redemption's attack on David had been a reckless assault on someone who time and again had saved the world, reason enough to act against the First Redemption Church. If someone was pulling strings from behind the scenes, they'd find out now. From his vantage point, Batman saw the fight clearly. Redemption had landed hardly any meaningful hits for several minutes. He didn't have Brainiac's computational edge to counter David's precise gravity manipulations. His movements were crude and predictable. With a little gravity added in the right place, David distorted Redemption's balance, and the man looked like a clumsy brute. Even with accelerated healing, Batman expected the outcome. Redemption's frustration boiled over as he failed to land a blow. "Impatience will only make this worse," David warned, dodging a blue energy swipe and tripping Redemption with a bolt of lightning. "Your combat experience is worse than some street thugs," he added. Redemption had fought terrorists and soldiers, never an opponent who could truly push back. To his followers, he appeared godlike. In true combat, he was exposed. Clark relaxed a fraction when he saw David controlling the fight. He scanned toward the coordinate Cyborg had sent and flipped his vision toward the little church, ready to jump in if things went sour. Hai Tuahua had once described odd battlefield events. He might not be ordinary himself. Suddenly, David barked a warning. "Clark, Diana, stand back!" They spun their heads just in time to see a furious, blistering wind bearing down on them. Redemption, eyes wild and wrapped in blue flame, had chosen a new tactic. If he couldn't touch David, he would take hostages. Clark and Diana would be leverage. If he captured one of them, he could force David to give up the mask. In Wallace Falls, the small, secluded church of the First Redemption Church was packed. Congregants bent their heads in prayer. "Redemption, we believe in redemption," they intoned in unison. Behind the lectern, the priest Hai Tuahua, who had been praying with eyes closed, opened them. A faint blue glow flashed, and he looked up. The church door burst inward, sand swirling in as Hal Jordan, Aquaman, and the rest filed through. Flash soothed frightened worshippers. "We need to interrupt," he said gently. "Hai Tuahua," Batman called, standing just inside the doorway in his towering mecha. "What is your purpose in having Redemption demand the mask?" Hai Tuahua's face stayed calm but without surprise. He spread his arms and gave a low, resonant speech about unwavering faith. "We must offer loyal faith to repay the Lord," he intoned. "Is it we or you?" Batman snapped. "You never asked anyone else what they wanted." Hai Tuahua's eyes were full of fanaticism. He truly believed in God, but that didn't excuse his methods. "Trying to warp the thoughts of people worldwide with the mask is depravity," Batman said. "If God knew, do you think he would approve?" "Silence," Hai Tuahua cried, and his body suddenly flared with searing energy. The light filling the dim church outshone the sun. The thin, elderly priest no longer looked frail. He seemed like a titanic being capable of cleaving heaven and earth. The pressure in the room made everyone stagger. The air seemed to stop. Fear clamped at their chests. "Something's wrong," Flash whispered, voice trembling. "I feel like he's even scarier than that Redemption." Hal Jordan's lantern ring alerted him. "The energy signature is the same as Redemption's, only far stronger," Cyborg reported. "How could two people have the same devastating power?" Arthur hurled his trident like a spear with the force of a tidal surge. Hai Tuahua's robes billowed, though no wind blew. He rose casually and flicked his hand, batting the trident aside. It skittered into the ground dozens of meters away, its tip molten. Arthur stared in horror. This was his mother's weapon, heirloom of the previous king of Atlantis, and it had been casually melted by the priest's strike. "Everyone, hold steady. He must have a weakness or a limit." Batman barked as he maneuvered his mecha into a defensive posture, trying to keep the team calm while watching Hai Tuahua rise. Batman had planned to pry the priest open with words, to expose his plot to subvert the world with the mask. He never expected his provocation to reveal yet another walking supernuclear bomb. Above the grassland, which had become a cratered valley of pits and hollows, a fist slammed into Clark's head. A gust of displaced air exploded outward. His mind rocked. His vision spun as if he had been struck by the moon. A powerful hand seized his arm, trying to pull him in. In a daze, his arm resisted on instinct. "No, not now, Father." At that moment, redemption, wrapped in blue, searing energy, flickered and went out. The overwhelming power that had flattened mountains with a gesture vanished, and in the air he looked suddenly ordinary, terrified, and disoriented. Crack! Crack! A wet, horrible sound of flesh being torn, a high, choking scream. Stabilizing himself midair, Clark saw with a sickening clarity a bloody arm clutched in his hand. He recoiled and dropped it as if shocked. This wasn't me. Redemption, drained of power and returned to a common human, collapsed under gravity. Bone-deep pain struck his head. He fainted and began to plummet toward the ground. Clark hastily protested that the brutal, bloody tearing was not his doing. Yet the truth was, he had done it in a frantic, uncontrolled counterattack when the angel's force abruptly failed. His power is gone? David, who had been about to intercept redemption, paused in mid-flight and frowned. The angel of God, with infinite might, had suddenly reverted to a mere man? He watched the falling figure, and just before redemption would have smashed into the pit and been pulverized, moved with blinding speed and caught him, preventing a massacre. What happened to him? Did his power just run out? They landed, and Clark set the unconscious, bleeding redemption on the ground. Diana stared, incredulous and uncertain. How had the towering menace who had dominated them moments ago become so weak? David's eyes flicked toward Yasir's direction. He'd expected this fight to take longer, something that Batman and the others triggered while hunting. Hai Tuohua must have set off a chain reaction. The details were still unclear. "Let's go see," he said. Diana was about to move when a blue flare shot into the sky 100 miles away. Terrifying energy overflowed. Figures fled in panic. A man like the previous redemption, swathed in blue flame, rushed forward, radiating a killing intent that chilled the air. "You destroyed 60 years of my work. You will all pay." Hai Tuohua's face was a hard, demonic mask. He unleashed an energy wave from his palm that blasted Cyborg and Arthur away. A gleaming green riot shield, as thick as a city wall, shattered with a single blow. A torrent of blue energy enveloped Hal Jordan and hurled him into a ravine on Yasir's border. Batman barely held off an attack. The heavy mech was sent flying like a thrown battering ram. Damn it! The mech's power couldn't match this onslaught. Still, David suspected Hai Tuohua must have limits. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sent Gerard forward as the angel and stayed hidden behind the priestly role. He looked at Gerard, lying unconscious on the ground with a torn arm, then at the approaching Hai Tuohua. Gerard's sudden loss of power and Hai Tuohua's appearance suggested a connection. Is Gerard just the battery? Can Hai Tuohua control this power, or does Gerard draw it from him? David's gaze sharpened. That might be the truth. "You, hand over the mask," Hai Tuohua roared when he saw Gerard's ruined arm. Hai Tuohua focused his wrath on David, firing a 12-meter-thick energy cannon. David, Clark, Diana, and the others dodged. The impact gouged a crater kilometers wide, a strike with the force of a nuclear blast. Hai Tuohua's energy seemed limitless as it kept hammering at them. David fired I-beams at range, but they were blocked by Hai Tuohua's energy shield. Then David noticed something odd. Despite the seemingly endless outpouring of power, Hai Tuohua was panting in the air, moving like an old man unused to exertion, barely able to lift his arms. A cannon made of glass? David thought. Gravity manipulation failed to grab him because of the shield. Then a memory clicked into place. The rumors about redemption. Perhaps the true, belief-fueled power wasn't Gerard's at all, but Hai Tuohua's, the founder of the Redemption Church. Gerard might only be the channel. If that was true, Hai Tuohua was vulnerable in other ways. Bang! David vanished and reappeared beside Hai Tuohua in a streak of light. Time seemed to freeze. Inside the blue flame shield, Hai Tuohua's wrath-dark face was frozen in shock. David unleashed a barrage of thunder-wrapped punches, hundreds of blows in an instant, and the energy shield shattered like glass. He plunged his arm through flames that could vaporize steel and clamped his hand around Hai Tuohua's neck. Hai Tuohua's eyes bulged. He choked and fought to breathe, staring at the man who had suddenly materialized behind his guard. "You! Don't move. Your bones aren't as strong as a normal man's, David said, half smiling. It wouldn't do for me to misjudge my strength and kill you. Haituohua, it turned out, wasn't another redemption in the sense of being an invulnerable avatar. He could pour out immense energy, but his physical body was frail, his bones weakened by fanaticism and thin from years hiding in prayer rather than battle. He seethed with fury and desperation, glaring at Clark, Batman, and the battered Green Lantern. Do you know what you destroyed? Jared and I were supposed to be the perfect pairing. We were to spread God's gospel across the world. He spoke like a broken zealot, confessing a long obsession. Returning from the World War II battlefields, he'd vowed to make everyone believe as he did, to repay God's favor. He had invested decades into building a system of faith that could be tapped for nearly unlimited energy. Gerard only needed Haituahua's supply to manifest godlike abilities as the angel. Now, everything was gone. I can draw near infinite energy from belief. Jared merely needed to be supplied to become the angel. You destroyed it all. Despair turned to madness. The veins on his skin bulged and glowed, the man now a walking superbomb. I want you all dead, he roared, and violent energy burst from his eyes and mouth. Retreat, now, David shouted, realizing Haituahua intended to detonate himself and take everyone with him. He grabbed Haituahua and rocketed into space. Haitua's body hung like a pressure balloon about to burst. David could have crushed him, yet he dared not, for fear of triggering a catastrophic release. David, Clark leapt after him, grabbing on as they climbed through the atmosphere. David flung Clark free into a safe trajectory and pulled away. Blue light detonated in brilliance, wiping out a 100-mile radius. At the explosion's center, nothing remained. Not even a molecule endured. A wave of blue energy surged, a blue sun expanding outward and swallowing David's figure. The light was so intense that everyone on the ground had to shield their eyes. From space, a giant blue vortex formed in the planet's atmosphere, visible even from afar, tearing the air apart. A shock cleared the sky for hundreds of miles. The glow could be seen across Africa. Oh, God! Primitive tribes who'd not fully merged with modern society fell to their knees and prayed, convinced the heavens were punishing the world, that the end had come. When the light faded, Clark, having dropped the unconscious redemption where David had set him, rushed into the blasted vacuum and found David alive, smoke curling from his suit. Are you okay? I'm fine, David said, waving a singed hand. His suit was riddled with holes, his skin reddened, but he was standing. I flew fast. If I'd been at the center, it would have put me out for a while. That's good. Clark patted his arm, relieved. Batman, Cyborg, and the others arrived, all visibly shaken. Cyborg's analysis was blunt. The energy released just now, it exceeds the Tsar Bomba. They all stared. The Tsar Bomba had been a 50-megaton hydrogen bomb, the largest nuclear weapon in human history. Its blast and thermal effects had been legendary. The blue detonation had rivaled or surpassed that, except without nuclear fallout. Batman's expression hardened. He understood the human body can mask severe internal injuries. Get checked, he said. David laughed and waved them off, gesturing at Clark. He was okay, and with Haituahua's power cut off, redemption could no longer cause global-scale manipulation. He'd be locked away, forcibly contained. A newsfeed would soon update. A hum of media lines threaded through their comms as headlines formed. The angel sent by God to save humanity, or a terrorist who tried to brainwash the world. Mysterious blue light visible across Africa. Was this a suicide attack against Overman and the Justice League? The new century's biggest religious fanatic, Haituahua. Redemption, once held up by some Catholics as proof of God, had been exposed as a manufactured religious star, a creation of someone with a manipulative design. The world was shaken, but because the Justice League, led by Overman, had intervened, the crisis was ended before it could spread. Overman's name and deeds spread, earning him new reverence. Metropolis, days later. A man opened a package in the heat and found his new Overman figurine broken. The head and torso snapped off. He scowled. It fell when I was turning on 7th Avenue, the delivery man said, rubbing a scraped cheek and sitting on his bike. If you're not satisfied, file a claim. The recipient fumed as the delivery man pedaled off. He cursed under his breath about having to deliver in noon heat, eating a roadside wrap, and now being blamed. Turning the corner, The delivery man didn't hear the screams until he was almost on top of them. A shadow loomed. A screech of friction filled the air. He toppled from his bike and stared in horror at a 3-meter-tall purplish-red slime creature. No arms, no legs, no head, an endless mass. "Help! I'm going to be eaten!" he shouted as the alien pounced. Instead of swallowing, the creature's mass seeped into his skin, into his pores. He went black. When he woke, he didn't open eyes like before. Hunger gnawed at him, relentless and all-consuming. His body was purple-red and unfamiliar. A deep, animal growl rose from his throat as he lunged at the crowd, ravenous. Name, Zhou Shan. Talent, 9 breaths chi absorption cultivation method. Eagle claw iron cloth shirt, not yet mastered. Zhou Shan had transmigrated to another world and acquired the 9 breaths chi absorption from the 36 heavenly spirits techniques. 9 breaths chi absorption drew the yuan chi of heaven and earth through a regulated breath, no conscious activation required. With a steady rhythm of inhalation and exhalation, it refined energy automatically, whether walking, sitting, eating, or sleeping. Each day of ordinary breathing advanced cultivation as much as a year of dedicated meditation. I get stronger just by breathing. I'm practically taking off, Zhou Shan thought, and the hunger drove him forward. Chapter 166, Parasite Demon and Template 98, 4K5. The bicycle courier Michael Allen was gone. In his place stood Parasite, a grotesque fusion of life and hunger. His purplish-red skin looked like flayed flesh stretched over a gaunt frame. His mouth was packed with pale, vicious teeth. He pounced into the terrified crowd, snatching people the way a farmer grabs chicks and instantly draining their life energy. 2 withered bodies, faces frozen in the last moments of terror, collapsed to the pavement like desiccated husks. Parasite struck again and again, rampaging down the street like a predator among sheep, a starving glutton at a limitless banquet. To him, every passerby was a walking meatball. Life after life snuffed out, screams filled the air as people ran in blind panic. "Run! Somebody help!" Parasite's shriveled torso swelled as he fed, but the hunger gnawed on. He punched the asphalt. The road shattered and sparks flew. With monstrous strength, he ripped up thick electrical cables from beneath the street, wires as large as a grown man's thigh, and clamped them in his hands. He began greedily siphoning the city's electricity. Around him, the few who tried to resist were flung aside like rag dolls. From across Metropolis, on 9th Avenue, Clark heard the cries and streaked through the city in an instant, appearing over the block as Parasite drained half the neighborhood's power. The extra electricity transformed the creature. He ballooned to nearly 3 meters, muscles bulging explosively beneath that hideous skin. Electricity crackled across his body. He looked up like an animal that had found prey. "What are you?" Clark demanded. He took in the dozens of drained corpses littering the street and punched, anger and disgust fueling the blow. "Superman smells delicious." Parasite licked his lips and launched himself like a cannon, colliding with Clark. The two traded blows. Parasite was hurled through the window of a jewelry store and smashed rows of display cases. He surged back with a low, hungry voice. "So tasty, like a chocolate bar the size of the Eiffel Tower. Did you come just to rescue me?" "Rescue?" Clark sneered and rushed forward, intent on lifting Parasite out of the city before more people died. The instant Clark's hand closed on his neck, a terrifying suction welled up. Energy drained from him as if a valve had been opened. The pain came with a high-voltage jolt that sent a groan out of him. Parasite laughed. "You're even better than the stories. Folks say you're more obliging than Overman. Superman answers every call, even for a kitten. It's true." He squeezed Clark's head in huge hands, fingers like iron bands, and ramped up the absorption. Clark's vision blurred as his strength plummeted. He threw a desperate battleship swing of a punch to Parasite's chest and abdomen. The monster's back arched and his eyes bulged, but then the blow sank like hitting solid rubber. Parasite only grunted. Clark's strikes weakened as the parasite grew larger, now 4 or 5 meters tall, and Clark's strength dropped with each passing second. He realized in alarm that this thing could not only siphon power like David, it could forcibly leech an opponent's unreleased energy. He was being drained to nothing in a handful of seconds. "Excellent," Parasite purred. "The hunger fades. Now I can think again." His human recollection flickered to the fore. Once a courier, once scolded and small. Now a city's champion lay in his hand like a newborn pup. "Let me go," Clark rasped, using the last of his heat vision to blast Parasite in the face. The bright beams seared. The monster reflexively released his grip, stumbling backwards. Clark tried to fly upward, to keep distance and fight from the air. This creature was slow and flightless. He had to buy time. But in a blink, something flashed across the sky, as if teleporting to cut him off. "Where do you think you're going, Superman? I can smell at least 10% of your energy left. Give it to me." Parasite's eyes burned molten red. Seconds later, the crowd watched in stunned horror as two searing heat beams struck the sky itself. Clark's body was blasted from the air like a projectile and crashed into a crater tens of meters wide. Parasite dove to the bottom, hauled him up with a hand the size of a car door, and began to greedily drain him again. Superman wilted, his robust form shriveling into something almost cadaverous held in Parasite's grip. "You absorb sunlight?" the monster laughed. "A rechargeable battery, and if I keep you, I get everything. Your powers, your strength, everything." Clark, barely conscious, thought of the lantern ring on his hand. With his last remaining strength, he sent a mental distress call to the Justice League and to David. Metropolis is in danger." Then his head lolled and he blacked out. Parasite licked his lips. Earth lay before him like a super buffet, teeming life energy by the millions, nearby cities and countries within reach. With super senses and newfound speed, he could harvest tens of thousands in a heartbeat. The hunger was leaving. He was elated. "Monster, let him go!" Cyborg's voice cut through the chaos as a streak of yellow lightning smacked into the pavement and a figure skidded to a stop. More League heroes descended. Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Aquaman, and Arthur, Cyborg cradling him. Cyborg's optics flared. His arm reshaped into an ultrasonic energy cannon and fired at Parasite, who simply absorbed it without flinching. The look on Cyborg's face turned to alarm. "This is the Justice League," Parasite said with relish, sweeping his gaze over them. So many different, unique life energies, each a new flavor to try. He appraised Aquaman, Green Lantern, Flash, Wonder Woman, and Cyborg like a gourmand reading a menu. He barely bothered with Batman in his Fenrir armor, sneering as if it were cheap fries. "Priority 1, rescue Superman. Do not let the monster touch him," Batman warned, his voice low. "If he can drain Superman in seconds, any contact could be lethal to us." They attacked in unison. The Flash snatched up a street sign and hurled it. Green Lantern conjured a massive fist with his ring. Aquaman lunged with his trident. Wonder Woman swung her lasso in a wide arc. A ferocious skirmish erupted. Meanwhile, in Smallville, David sat on his family's farm, sipping red tea and watching grazing cows across the green pastures. Martha's voice called for Jonathan from the house, but David barely heard it. His mind was occupied with the glow on his wrist. Template integration 8%. Graviton's template was almost fully integrated. After resolving the redemption affair, stopping the Redemption Church's plot, and saving the world again, his template integration had surged in 2 days, and it was still climbing. "Maybe I won't have to wait until tomorrow," he thought. "Maybe I'll get a new template today." More templates meant more power. Even stacked with the 6 gods' abilities, he'd already beaten Clark before, and knew almost no one on Earth could best him. But he didn't forget Darkseid or Brainiac, real threats that required far greater strength. He wanted the power to defend his family and the universe itself. Only then could he truly relax. The lantern ring on his hand flared, sending a distress ping from Clark. The ring played a combat feed, Clark battling a purplish-red behemoth that siphoned energy and grew. The scene, absorption, power theft, ability mimicry, matched the classic supervillain. "Parasite," David muttered. A crack of lightning struck. The figure on the lounge chair vanished. David shot toward Metropolis at once. Parasite's reputation didn't frighten David. What worried him was the thought that Parasite could kill Superman. He arrived over the shattered block with a cold expression. The Justice League was here, but battered. Batman's Fenrir armor lay drained and useless, hurled onto the 23rd floor of a nearby tower. Batman was trying to open the hatch and grappling down, warning David as he came. "Don't let him touch you." Batman shut his jaw. Diana, Green Lantern, Cyborg, and Aquaman all lay to the side, their life force leached, near mummified, but not killed. Parasite wanted to taste their unique energies and had spared them for more meals. Only the Flash was still moving, darting about and harrying the beast. The parasite clapped his hands in frustration, breaking glass and sending Flash flying. David caught Barry mid-flight and set him down gently. Though the Flash clutched his head, his eardrums burst and his fighting capability was compromised. The sky churned with thunder, the atmosphere tightened with a different kind of intensity. Parasite turned and fixed David with a cruel look. Recognition flared in his eyes, the memory of being scolded for damaging an Overman action figure that morning. A new taste, Parasite hissed. I wonder what your life energy will taste like. On the streets of Metropolis, Parasite had already drained Wonder Woman and the others, assimilating their abilities. His body swelled to 7 or 8 meters tall, muscles ballooning, maw gaping like a savage hole. He lunged, hands snapping toward David. Crack, crack, the pavement exploded under his push, sending debris flying. David's eyes narrowed. With a thought, a powerful gravitational field dropped around Parasite. The creature's speed collapsed as if a mountain had been pressed onto it. Parasite lunged at David, who tilted his head to dodge the giant hand, dropped his stance, and threw a punch. Bang! Parasite was rocketed backward like a missile, crashing through several storefronts before stopping in midair. David frowned as he felt a small draught of power slip from his body. It was negligible, but it confirmed something important. His energy absorption ability was inferior to Parasite's. Your energy tastes like, it tastes like. Parasite hovered, a muscular demon in the sky, thinking aloud like a glutton savoring a strange dish. A sneer spread across his face. Maybe I should taste it again to be sure. They met in a brutal exchange of blows. Cars were blown away by shockwaves as the two figures traded lightning-fast strikes. Parasite's fists, like hydraulic presses, slammed and were thrown back, only for him to recover and attack again. It's a bit cold, like lemon-shaved ice, he said between hits, and it tingles the tongue, numbing, like chili. David's power was a complex fusion of abilities, an unfamiliar mix to the Parasite. I heard you could call down lightning, Overman, Parasite taunted in the middle of the fight. Why not use it now? He was trying to provoke David into using energy attacks. Each clinch and clash gave Parasite tiny tastes of David's power, and as he siphoned more, he began to feel new abilities bud inside him. But David was not so easily baited. Fists carrying tectonic force rained down, pushing Parasite back like a plow. Parasite even managed to steal a trace of Speed Force once, and he could absorb energies beyond normal physics, so relying on energy was a trap. David's eyes went cold. If I use energy, he just grows stronger, David thought. He had other tools, raw strength and gravity manipulation. Parasite, however, had already drained Clark, Diana, and Arthur, temporarily gaining some of their powers. His physical strength now matched about 70% of David's, so this would be a brutal close-quarters slugfest rather than a quick knockout. To goad him, Parasite fired heat vision. David raised his arms. The blast pushed him back, but also replenished some of the energy he'd lost. He snatched a van with telekinesis and hurled it at Parasite. The Parasite tore the van in half like paper and flung the halves back. David became a purple streak of motion, his fist crashing into Parasite's head and snapping it backward. He chased, aiming at the creature's skull to stop it absorbing more. You want to knock me out? Not that easy. Parasite snarled and grabbed David's hand, about to siphon a big pull of energy. David struck him in the gut with a force like a mountain. The hold was broken, and Parasite retaliated, the city shaking as if two beasts were fighting. White ripples of shockwaves rolled outward, threatening nearby buildings. Batman and Flash moved the fallen League members to safety, while terrified citizens fled, watching from a distance. The others had already been hit. If Overman fell too, the devastation Parasite had started would only grow. All their hope rested on David. Another punch met. David felt the rate at which his energy was being drained accelerate. He noticed Parasite grinning. Interesting, the monster said. My ability to absorb energy is getting stronger. Parasite reached, and manhole covers lifted into the air, flying at supersonic speed, blades capable of slicing a skyscraper. The Parasite's new gravitational knack let him chase David and manipulate energy, which in turn strengthened his drain. David's expression didn't change. He burned the manhole covers with scorching eye beams, melting them into molten iron, then descended to the street. Not planning to fight anymore? Giving up? Parasite mocked. David stood on the ground and thought. The earth trembled. Parasite felt a change in the mass around him. Something was being stripped. David's voice was calm. This is going to be uncomfortable for you, but I don't see any other fast way to stop you. Wind whipped around David as he drew mass from the surrounding ground into himself. His body swelled from 2 meters to 3, and in a blink to 6 or 7 meters and climbing. This was a new usage of gravity manipulation revealed after his graviton template exceeded 70% integration. It was dangerous and brutal on his cells, like being drenched in cement, because he was literally stealing mass from the city to amplify himself. The process cracked the ground and shattered the foundations of nearby towers. 10 meters tall, David launched himself, his fist ripping through the air like a cannon. Enveloped in a torrent of hypergrav particles, his blow smashed Parasite dozens of meters underground, opening a massive crater. A collapsing building was blown apart by the blast and disintegrated in midair. Flash hurled the remaining League members several hundred meters away, sparing them the epicenter. The impact made Parasite's head spin. Blood spilled from his mouth as he tried to strike back, but the punch merely sent David skidding a dozen meters before he steadied. His physical defense had skyrocketed. Parasite's blow left no mark. David's next punches drove Parasite back, each hit accompanied by shockwaves and splintering bone. Under the onslaught, Parasite's face was battered, his jaw and teeth loosened, his bones groaning from terrible strain. He staggered like a boxer on the verge of being stopped. Parasite tried to grab and absorb David, knowing that a single solid grasp might turn the tide. He was desperate. He even tried to imitate David's mass-draining trick to bulk himself up, but his gravity control was only a fraction of David's now. "You can't kill me," he rasped, at one point with a broken arm already knitting itself back together. "I have an immortal healing ability. Smash my head all you want. I regenerate. Unless you vaporize me with energy, you can't finish me." David sneered. With his super senses, he heard the tiny clicks as Parasite's bones realigned. The creature wasn't bluffing. Parasite's true form was an alien, an original slime-like organism that bonded to hosts. Conventional destruction couldn't truly end it. "I'm taking you somewhere with infinite energy," David said simply. "You can absorb all you want." Parasite's eyes widened. His grip tightened in panic. "You wouldn't dare." David looked up at the sun. He grabbed Parasite telekinetically and shot into the sky, linking Earth's and the sun's gravitational fields to form a tunnel through space. They streaked across the void and arrived before the colossal star, its face searing and insane with nuclear fury. "Go. You'll never be hungry again," David said, and sent Parasite toward the sun. The Parasite screamed as it was hurled into the furnace. It reached desperately into the void, trying to cling to anything, but there was nothing. The sun's surface rolled and boiled. Parasite tried to draw energy, but it was like a bug pressed to a stove, too much heat, too fast. Its absorption ability, once satiated by Superman and the others, was already near capacity. In less than a second, the infinite energy detonated inside it. Parasite exploded, utterly annihilated. The star's brilliance left no trace. No shard of Parasite dust remained. David watched the disintegration through supervision to make sure it was complete. "Some cosmic versions of Parasite can take memories along with energy," he murmured. "I wondered if this one did." It didn't matter now. There would be no gleaning of Clark's or David's identities from that organism, no chance for a psionic pirate-style breach. They returned to Earth. David used the sun to recharge Clark, letting him bathe in sunlight to recover his lost energy. Diana and the others couldn't be instantly restored. They had to recuperate at the Justice League base. Citizens and rescue crews began cleanup. Clark, his muscles filling out and color returning to his face, clutched his chest as if still feeling the aftertaste of near death. "That thing was terrifying," Clark said, staring at the sun with lingering fear. "Is it really gone?" David didn't answer at once. If Parasite hadn't first drained Clark and gained his powers, the others might have had a chance and wouldn't have been overwhelmed. Clark admitted, a little sheepish, that he'd been careless. He should have studied the enemy first. "All right, we should head back," Clark said finally. "The media probably got photos of you being drained. Ma and Pa are going to be worried. I've recovered almost completely, David replied. The two streaked sunward and then homeward, light against the blue. In space, David suddenly stopped. He frowned and looked at the moon. Clark followed his gaze. There was an ugly crater, the lunar surface desolate and silent, nothing out of the ordinary. Clark asked, puzzled, "What is it?" David shook his head. "I felt like I was being watched." He'd had the sense since before they reached the sun, a prickling awareness that someone was looking. Clark scanned the emptiness. There was nothing. "Maybe it's nothing," Clark said. The feeling vanished as soon as David searched for it, but he was sure it hadn't been an illusion. He felt the attention had been on Clark, not him. When he'd taken Clark out of Earth and closer to the moon, the scrutiny had flared. Now it had faded, but that didn't mean whoever watched had stopped. They returned to Earth. As they re-entered the atmosphere, David felt completion ripple through his core. Graviton template integrated 100%. Loading new template. The template is finally fully integrated, he muttered, an eyebrow lifting, a small, anticipatory smile touching his lips. Fourth template loading. Loading 3%, 27%. Mom. While the new template loaded, David brought Clark home. Jonathan and Martha Kent had been watching the news in stunned silence. Images of Clark, emaciated and pacing, had filled the screen. Hearing the commotion, they looked up to see their eldest son standing in the doorway, tall and whole, his face as it always was. Relief and surprise washed over them. "Clark, your body, but we saw you on TV." Jonathan stared, as if the broadcast had been some kind of sensational hoax. "David took me out for some sun," Clark said. "I'm fine." Clark stepped in, embraced them both, and tried to put their minds at ease. "Are you really okay, son?" Martha asked, still unsettled. The TV image had been ghastly, his head gaunt as a skull, far worse than any serious illness. "I'm fine." Clark smiled and flexed an arm to show his parents the muscle beneath his shirt. Kryptonians can draw strength from the sun to heal, even to resurrect. David decided to reinforce Clark's reassurance. The Kents had always worried about their boys, but each time the danger passed, they had calmed. David had handled crises for years without serious injury. It was Clark who now made them anxious. "Really?" Jonathan asked, incredulous. Clark sounded surprised himself. Did Kryptonians actually have that ability? He hadn't seen it in the Fortress of Solitude's records. Still, his younger brother always seemed to know more about the wider universe. "I'm not advising anyone to rush into danger," David added quickly, seeing Clark's thoughtful expression darken. "Resurrection by solar absorption only works if your body hasn't been completely destroyed." Knowing Clark, David's warning mattered. If Clark believed he could get up and heal no matter what, he'd be reckless. David wasn't lying. Time and again, the sun had restored Superman when it mattered most. Martha, now relieved, bustled about in the kitchen, putting together a hearty meal, while Jonathan visibly relaxed. David, on the other hand, slipped outside to the nearby woods. Fourth template loaded, Hyperion King template merging. Tall trees cast a cool green shade. David made a fist and felt the Shazam force surge through him as the merge progressed. His muscles tightened, his bones felt denser and harder, as if made of compact, stellar matter. When he used the Shazam force, his face took on a more mature look, something his parents might not expect, so at home he usually kept it subdued. He didn't share Captain Marvel's vulnerability. He didn't have to fear surprise attacks. Beep, his body thrummed. His senses sharpened until they were almost overwhelming. He could see through the trees, into the distant town, through steel and concrete. He could hear traffic in Metropolis, low conversations, even the soft hum of bees in the city garden. He had once relied on a gravity field sensor to perceive distant events through obstacles. Now, he didn't need that. Within 1,000 miles, every rustle and movement was laid bare to him, like a god surveying the world. David glanced at the template readout again and frowned. Hyperion King? He knew Hyperion, an orphan of the Eternals from the Marvel Universe, raised on Earth after his homeworld was destroyed, a figure with powers very like Clark's: super strength, speed, vision. The key differences were that Hyperion often had ageless immortality and a regenerative body. It clicked. Every hero could have many variants across universes: White Suit Iron Man, Captain Universe Spider-Man, Frog Thor. Hyperion King was the pinnacle version, the most powerful Hyperion in the multiverse, a tyrant who had once overmatched even Hulk and Thor before being driven into exile by other versions of himself. Healing even if shattered, an immortal regenerative Superman, David murmured. This template might rival or even surpass Superman at his peak. It was, he realized, the strongest single template he'd acquired so far. The merged templates had already elevated him above Clark in many ways. This one could make a single leap that matched Prime Superman. Template merged 30%, the system announced. Roughly 3 or 4 months? David estimated, thinking of how fast he'd been gaining emotional points since becoming Overman and joining the Justice League. If he kept at this pace and finished merging this template, the next step could finally put him beyond Clark's prime, provided he completed the merge. Standing on a high slope, David looked up at the moon. At midday, most people couldn't see it, but his supervision picked out small craters as if he were there. The moon had felt watchful before, and now he transformed into a streak of light and shot up toward it. There was time before dinner. He had wanted to check the moon after increasing his strength. On the moon, in a vast crater, a tall, muscular figure stood on the rim. His skin was pale gray. His upper body, like steel, was scarred. Thick black hair streamed behind him. His eyes had no whites. His nails were black. He looked inhumanly cold. The only remnant of his battlesuit was the red and blue lower half, as if he had crossed the void of space through unimaginable conditions. When David approached from Earth, the figure frowned, the hem of his cape fluttered, and he turned silently away, leaving the moon at once. David had spent several days scanning the moon after dealing with Parasite. In the Marvel universe, something watching from the moon would have suggested the Watchers, those bald voyeurs of cosmic events. In the DC universe, it was less clear. Maybe the Guardians of the universe had taken an interest ever since David had, in their view, meddled, snatching a lantern ring and forcing compromises. Hal Jordan was back in the Corps, something David had suspected might be connected to his own actions. Still, he'd found no one solid on the moon. Either whoever it was had left, or they were hiding deeper than he had bothered to look. For now, he set it aside and kept an eye out for anything that might disturb his quiet life. That morning, sunlight flooded the Kent living room. David and Clark had just finished breakfast and were lounging on the sofa watching a comedy when the lantern rings pinged. "Superman, Overman, are you there?" Cyborg's voice came through. David was surprised. He didn't usually get pulled into the League's routine alerts. Clark tensed. A call that named both of them together meant something serious. "The League's satellite array has detected a sudden meteor shower heading toward Earth," Cyborg said. "Estimated arrival in about 10 minutes. Predicted impact zone, radius roughly 50 miles, centered at 37.15°, 88.73°. Clark frowned. "That coordinate sounds familiar." "It's Smallville," David said, eyes narrowing. "It's covering Smallville." Clark's pace grew restless. Memories of a meteor shower 20 years earlier flooded him, the one that had brought him to Earth, the one that led to his adoption by Jonathan and Martha. Now, 2 decades later, another meteor shower was aimed at the town. Cyborg had contacted David because, aside from world-scale crises, there was one other type of alert the League routed to him: threats tied to Metropolis and Smallville. Between Clark and David, they could handle an extraterrestrial impact. Calling him was precautionary. "Understood. Overman and I will handle it," Clark replied. He stood, nerves taut. "Is it a coincidence?" he asked David. "Could it be that, besides me and Zod's people, there are other Kryptonians out there?" "Let's go find out," David said. He felt the same doubt in his gut. Smallville, so ordinary and special at once, being struck again by meteors? It felt far from random. Out over Metropolis, 2 figures hovered above a sea of clouds. The atmosphere screamed as meteorites punched through, their surfaces ignited by friction. Clark scanned rapidly, filtering each streak with supervision. The meteorites ranged in size and contained varied energy signatures, some with impact forces of tens of thousands of tons. He wasn't worried about the energy per se. He feared what might be hidden inside one of them, a crashed ship or a living passenger torn apart in the chaos. David watched him for a moment, then lifted a hand. A powerful gravity field extended from David and wrapped around the meteor swarm. The tumbling rocks carrying terrible momentum froze midair, their surfaces still ablaze. "It's rare to see you nervous, Clark," David called. "Did you forget I can do this?" Clark slapped his forehead. He'd been so focused on searching for hidden ships that he'd forgotten David could simply stop the whole thing. "You have plenty of time to search," David said, and with another motion, the meteorites of every size, some as large as houses, some the size of fists, settled down on a hillside outside town. They hit like red-hot irons, scorching the earth, but with them immobilized, the problem was suddenly easier. Clark swept his gaze over the debris and stiffened. There's a ship." A complex mix of feelings ran through him. Another ship like the one that had brought him 2 decades earlier, this time larger. "This ship's much bigger than the one I came in." David, using X-ray vision, confirmed what Clark saw. Inside one of the meteorites, a streamlined craft half the size of a house was encased, its shell distinguishable from the rock. An emblem was painted across its hull, a stylized S, the crest of the House of El. David snorted. "Probably not a crying baby inside," he said, then extended his hand and plucked the meteorite. The outer rock cracked and fell away. Between the scorched grass lay a blue and red craft, sleek and familiar. Inside, a slender figure slept, features delicate as a porcelain doll. As they watched, her lashes fluttered and she stirred. The alien traveler who had crossed countless light years to reach Earth blinked awake. Chapter 169, Liar. My cousin is still a baby. My head aches. It feels like I've just woken from a very, very long dream. Kara opened her eyes groggily and realized she was inside a spaceship. When had she boarded it? Where was it headed? Her thoughts, rusty from disuse, creaked back into motion and long-buried memories surfaced. She pressed her palm to the dull throb at her temple and whispered, "Father." The disaster that destroyed Krypton, the escape pod, heading toward a distant world with a yellow sun. She pushed the command to open the hatch. With a screech and a hiss of hot steam, it unlatched, and golden sunlight flooded the cabin. The warmth washed over her like a mother's arms. Mother. Seeing that yellow star that was not Krypton's, a shadow of sadness passed across her face. Then she noticed 2 unfamiliar men watching her from behind a pile of meteorites. Having gone through military training back on Krypton, she sat up straight and slipped into a fighting stance in an instant. Every muscle was tense, every sense alert, her fists clenched as if powered by endless energy. As the old legend said, a yellow sun awakened Kryptonian power. She studied the two without changing expression. But was this really a foreign world? Why did these aliens look human like Kryptonians? "She's wary and confused," one of them murmured. A dozen paces away, Clark kept his movements small, not wanting to frighten the woman who had just arrived on this strange planet. Anyone arriving somewhere strange and suddenly seeing people who look like them would react like this, he said softly. David chuckled under his breath. Seeing her aboard the ship made the answer obvious. This had to be Clark's cousin, Kara Zor-El, the woman known as Supergirl. 2 young men in odd clothing were talking about her right in front of her. Did they think she couldn't hear them? "Who are you, and why are you wearing my family crest?" Kara demanded, eyes narrowing as she fixed them on Clark's chest. That only made her angrier. She glared at the emblem and snapped, "I am Kara Zor-El. How dare you pretend to be from the House of El?" Clark's face froze. He had heard that name before. When he and David had brought an injured member of the House of El to the Fortress of Solitude, Clark's father had told him about the family. Kara was the daughter of Zor-El, his cousin. Relief and a rush of excitement washed over him. "You didn't die in Krypton's destruction?" "That's—" He started before catching himself. David, noticing Kara's distress, leaned slightly forward. "Focus. Block out the noise. Use your mind to filter what you don't want to receive." Kara's expression flickered. A high, intrusive ringing, the super-hearing overload, coursed through her skull, leaving her reeling. She clenched her teeth and managed, through the pain, "Who are you, really?" Clark stalled, then decided to try calm honesty. "He's my friend," he said, indicating David, then forced a steady voice. "And I am Kal-El." He used his Kryptonian name, hoping it would lower her guard. "Liar!" Kara snapped. In a blur, she launched herself at Clark and struck him with a punch that sent him flying. He smashed through a stand of trees and skidded backward, coughing up dust. "Cal was still a baby. I held him 3 days before I left," she spat. The idea that someone would impersonate her infant cousin was intolerable. "What did you do to him?" Kara didn't wait for an answer. She lunged at David next, but he calmly caught her fist in both hands. A circular shockwave rippled outward, sweeping leaves and dust for dozens of meters. His cape fluttered in the wind, his expression composed, as if her attack had been nothing serious. "Calm down," David said slowly. He understood what was happening: interstellar travel, disorientation, the sudden arrival under a yellow sun. Interstellar journeys can bring surprises. Time and distance don't always match what you expect. Kara felt a numbness in her knuckles as if she had struck metal. She looked at the young man holding her hand with mounting confusion. Ever since the sunlight had hit her, her strength had felt enormous, greater than the hull of a battle cruiser. Yet she had failed to push him even an inch. Had all that power been an illusion? Clark pushed himself up, coughing and rubbing his jaw. He tasted blood and felt the ache of a jaw thrown toward dislocation. He glared at Kara in stunned amazement. Her punches had hurt more than he expected, despite her slender frame. He had not expected his cousin to be so strong. David released her hand and stepped back, keeping his motion non-threatening. The man before her had clearly much greater strength, and his restraint told Kara he had not meant to hurt her. Still, her stance remained defensive. "What proof do you have?" she demanded. David met her gaze calmly. "My father, before he died, backed up his memories and consciousness and uploaded them into an intelligent system. He lives as a form of synthetic intelligence now. We can take you to see him." At those words, Clark's excitement nearly burst out again, until David shot him a warning look. Clark swallowed. Telling Kara that her father had been converted, mechanized, and then corrupted by Brainiac would only deepen her mistrust. They had destroyed the mechanized shell and secured him in the fortress, but that was not something to blurt out now. Kara's eyes widened. "You mean my father, Zor-El?" She hesitated, torn between suspicion and hope. Was this an ambush? Could she trust these strangers who shared her family crest? They had offered to take her to someone she might never see again. Her heart tugged toward the possibility, but the world felt unfamiliar, and her instincts warned her. She stood on the threshold of the ship, the yellow sun on her face and two unfamiliar men before her. And for the first time since she awoke, she let herself consider the hardest question. Could she step forward and trust them, or would she walk away and remain alone in a strange world? Chapter 170, 5 Ancient Demons. "This world has become strange to me." A hoarse, metallic voice, like fingernails on a steel plate, sent a chill through the trees. 3 figures stepped out of the shadows in Fawcett City's Central Park. One was a tall, slim young man in a suit, hands in his pockets, his face drawn and arrogant as if bored with everything around him. Odd-shaped houses, iron boxes that move on the streets. I preferred the old Earth, where lava ran everywhere. Beside him, a hulking black man exuded raw brutality. A reddish, lava-like glow rimmed his eyes. His voice was low and resonant. "Sealed for 10,000 years, our world has been twisted by humans," he said. He glanced at the final figure and asked, "Las, why did you 3 occupy a single human body?" The last man wore his hair wild and tangled, his eyes bloodshot as if perpetually high. 3 voices, distinct but blended, came from him. "Haven't you heard? This planet now has beings called superheroes. Some of them wield power comparable to ours. They can split mountains with a single strike and rend the earth with a wave of their hand." He looked at the suited man. You, who can take another's form and access their memories by touch, should know this best." Yustu sneered. "You mean that? Justice League? Are you afraid, Lass?" "Lass may be scared, but I, Cletus, fear no one." The large man, Cletus, thumped his chest. The lava in his eyes flared as if ready to erupt and burn the world he despised. "I will return the world to its true state, the way it was when we ruled it." "Not all of us grow stronger the more we're struck," the 3 who shared one body mocked, sinister laughter curling around their words. "But if anyone's afraid of those hairless monkeys, those Overman and Superman types, it's not us. I long to watch the human age burn." "Cletus, start," Yustu urged. "Use your scimitar. Turn it back." "Ha! Fire, lava, endless red wasteland. Rise again." Cletus drew a long, thin scimitar that seemed to flow like molten rock from behind him and drove it into the ground. The earth split under their feet. A column of volcanic heat shot upward, lifting them. Blackened soil and ash ripped through the forest. Trees were incinerated instantly. Sulfur mixed with the ash, blotting out the sun. The park trembled. An apocalyptic furnace rose where children had played only moments before. People in the park screamed and ran. Is it a volcano? How can there be a volcano here? It's erupting. Run. The 5 ancient demons laughed as the terrified cries washed over them. Cry, scream, your human apocalypse is here. They meant to create a supervolcano, to drown the world in lava and restore the planet to its primal state. These demons were the ancient rulers of the Earth's savage eras. Kings convened for a single purpose. What on this world could stop them? Not even gods, they seemed to believe. Meanwhile, far from the burning park, in the howling wind of the North Pole, a different kind of discovery was being made. Although the style is a bit old, this is Kryptonian. On the snow-swept plain near the Fortress of Solitude, a massive black ship lay like a sleeping beast on the ice. Kara recognized its origin at once. She had come with David and Clark to verify what they had told her, that there were Kryptonian ships here. If they were telling the truth, the young man who called himself Carl might be her only remaining blood relative, and the other young man, one whose strength even under a yellow sun she could not best, was, according to Carl, his younger brother. There's more than one Kryptonian ship here, Clark said, pointing toward another outline behind the fortress. Use your supervision. Kara steadied herself and pushed her gaze outward as David coached her. Concentrate. Control it with your mind. Born of the House of El, Kara's potential under a yellow sun wasn't exactly Clark's, but it far exceeded that of an ordinary Kryptonian. Under David's guidance, she'd learned to fly and had begun to awaken more of her powers. She adjusted her vision, felt it bloom and sharpen, and then saw the mothership hidden beneath the snow. This is the flagship of a Kryptonian fleet? She breathed, confusion and awe on her face. She knew exploration ships like the older probes, but a fleet's mothership was something else entirely. How had it ended up here? David explained. Other Kryptonians came to Earth in ships before. Zod and his followers came to destroy Earth and rebuild Krypton. Clark and I stopped them. Mentioning Zod tightened Clark's jaw. As one of the last Kryptonians, he had a hard, private expression. Not merely stopped, he was dangerously unhinged. I had no choice. David had to kill him. Kara's mouth fell open. Zod, Supreme Commander, the iron-blooded general whose iron will alone silenced whales and quelled unrest on Krypton, had been killed by 2 young men who were barely out of college? The idea was staggering. Clark's face twisted with complex regret. Had Zod not been so determined to annihilate Earth, he might have been spared confinement instead of death. David waved them off. Come on inside, unless you enjoy standing in the gale. They moved into the ship. The interior of the fortress hummed with familiar, alien technology. Suddenly, Jor-El appeared as a hologram, clear, precise, and instantly recognizable. His face held a mix of surprise and something softer as he looked at the niece he had thought forever lost. Uncle? Kara's voice cracked. Jor-El's questions tumbled out, about her family before Krypton's destruction, about what had happened in the last days. There had been no time for him to care for his brother's household in the panic. He filled in gaps with stories from their past. Gradually, Kara accepted what she was hearing. Clark, this young man standing beside them, matched a memory she had kept. The little Carl she had cradled 3 days in her recollection from long ago. To find a relative alive on an alien planet 20 years after Krypton's end overwhelmed her. Tears came. They exchanged looks and agreed, without speaking it aloud, not to tell Kara everything about Zor-El for now. They were still taking in the reunion when both David's and Clark's lantern rings lit up, a sharp, urgent beeping breaking the fragile calm. The rings flared with a cascade of alerts. David and Clark exchanged a grave look. There was a world-level crisis and the League was calling. What's wrong? What happened? Kara asked, startled. Fawcett City convulsed. The downtown park vanished as if erased, replaced by a supervolcano that shot thousands of meters into the sky and kept growing. It toppled surrounding skyscrapers with a thunderous roar. People scattered, screaming for help as the mountain, veins glowing with molten lava, crushed everything under its weight. Thick, scorching ash poured from the crater, blotting out the sky and setting fires across the city. On the volcano's flank, Aquaman and Flash staggered downhill, awkwardly carrying Cyborg, whose body was over 80% machine, while Diana followed close behind. Cyborg's breath came in weak gasps. Cyborg sent the message? Can it get through? Batman and Green Lantern can't hold much longer. Ash choked Aquaman, a man used to the crushing pressures of the deep sea. Now he coughed, as if losing consciousness. He glanced back at the summit. Beside the crater, Batman, running the Fenrir armor, and Green Lantern fought desperately against two demonic figures. Even in the powered suit and with the ring, they could only hang on. The demon's onslaught was overwhelming. One demon had bat wings, dark blue skin, a wolf-like head, and a pinpoint tail. Swift as a shadow, its claws could shred defenses forged of will. The other was a bloated ogre with 3 grotesque heads and fanged mouths, slow perhaps compared to the other, but still brutal. It was this 3-headed demon who, when the Justice League first appeared, had simply intoned their names and stripped them of their powers. Only Batman, in the Fenrir armor, and Green Lantern, using his ring as a weapon, still had any fight left in them. "Why did his spell work on you too?" Arthur panted. Even powerless, Aquaman was a muscular man, but carrying Cyborg's weight had him on the edge. "Maybe the machinery counts as part of my body," Cyborg rasped, his face pale. The demon's magic had leached his mechanical energy away, his systems, even life support, failing. So heavy. I remember before my powers, in college, my friends dragged me around. We had to push a broken-down car all night. Flash supported Cyborg from the other side, breathless from the narrow descent. I never realized how convenient powers were until now. Wonder Woman, this won't be permanent, right? Diana, who knew more about sorcery than most, didn't sound certain. She too looked worn without her strength. I don't think so, but it will take time to recover. The magic that erased their abilities had been frighteningly straightforward. The demons did not need true names. Calling out a recognizable title was enough to strip them down to ordinary humans. If it were permanent, ancient myths would surely scream of these monsters. "I hope Overman and Superman get here fast," Diana added. Cyborg forced a look back at the summit. Even if that demon stops, that eruption alone can turn Fawcett City and a dozen surrounding cities into a sea of fire. At the volcano's peak, a taller, molten figure worked at a gigantic scimitar embedded beneath its feet. With each heave, the mountain swelled, piercing clouds and launching avalanches of flame and ash. "That thing said it wants to destroy the world," Flash rasped with a bitter smile. "I never thought their taking their time would sound like good news." Arthur's face darkened as a worse possibility struck him. What if Overman and Superman are like us? What if their powers vanish the instant someone speaks their names? Cold sweat ran down Flash's temple. Then today, really, will be the end of the world. Far away at the Fortress of Solitude, Clark watched Cyborg's distress feed and felt hatred and fear tangle in his chest. Cyborg's message said a volcano had erupted in Fawcett City and was still growing, and the demons on the scene had stripped Wonder Woman and others of their powers merely by calling their names. Batman and Green Lantern were the only ones left fighting. David frowned as he watched the live feed. The 3 demons looked familiar. "The murals in the Rock of Eternity," he said. The Rock of Eternity recorded the wizard's work protecting humanity. Its murals depicted the old battles. Aside from some differences in number, 2 of those demons matched the 5 ancient fiends the wizard captured and sealed. "So the remaining 3 could be a single entity?" Clark asked. David shook his head. "Whatever the arrangement, these are the demons the successor of the 6 gods' power is meant to face. That means, at least, the 6 gods' power itself shouldn't be vulnerable to their trick." He thought of Captain Marvel's Shazam force and how powerful divine gifts were. If even the original god couldn't strip those powers, the demons might be limited. Kara stepped forward, eyes on the screen. "Fawcett City, on this planet? Who's Cyborg? It sounds serious. Are they calling for help?" Clark turned to her, urgency lighting his face. "Kara, now maybe only you can save this world." Kara stared. She'd only recently arrived and still had little grasp of this world's landscape. "What, me? We'll talk on the way," David said. "It might not be as hopeless as it looks." Within moments, the 3 of them had left the North Pole and vaulted toward Fawcett City at top speed. On the volcano, Hal Jordan drained his willpower to keep a protective construct alive. Eustace's blows had warped it, and the Green Lantern's reserves were being sipped away faster than ever. The demons' attacks hadn't been held back. They were toying with them, ancient creatures long imprisoned, enjoying the chance to play. His power is at least Diana's level, Hal muttered, one hand toiling to preserve the shield. Eustace, wolf-headed and lithe, swung a tail like a python and smashed Hal and his construct dozens of meters away. The demon sneered as he reapproached. "These hairless monkeys have developed some resilience," he chuckled. "Not just spears and bows anymore." From the eruption's edge, Batman was slammed by a punch from the three-headed demon, the Fenrir armor ricocheting against a lava flow. Stripped of his own superhuman conditioning, Bruce felt like someone who'd just done 100 rounds of heavy lifting. Every movement sluggish, the suit slow to respond. He could only be bounced about like a plaything. The Jazz brothers, demons sealed by the wizard for millennia, cackled. They took pleasure in the helplessness and despair of these newly mortal adversaries. Cletus, high above the crater, used his blade to pry at the world-devouring scimitar and keep the volcano swelling. "Savor them," the brothers hissed. "This is the best entertainment we've had in 10,000 years." Suddenly, Eustace's expression snapped from amusement to alert. He scanned the horizon with superhuman sight. Someone's coming, fast. He squinted and, piercing through the ash and cloud, saw 3 figures bearing down from miles away. "Stop playing," Eustace lashed out. His talons shredded Green Lantern's shield like paper. Hal fought to ride the wind and land, his ring nearly spent. The 3 demons smirked, confident the newcomers wouldn't stand against their magic. But then 3 streaks of light shattered the ash cloud horizon. David, Overman, stopped above the city and unleashed thick energy beams that struck the Zaz brothers who had turned to look. His arrival gave Batman a window of rescue. "Go rest, Bat," David said, and a gravity field slowed the Fenrir armor's descent toward the base of the volcano where Flash and the others scrambled. Clark's voice cut through the roar. "Stop your actions immediately." Seeing the city being crushed, he clenched a fist. "Successor of the wizard's power, you're finally here." Eustace ignored Clark at first, staring at David with a look of pure loathing. Demon memory was specific. They knew the world and its champions intimately. An online rumor mill could never have hidden the origins of Overman's lightning powers from one of the very beings the wizard had once imprisoned. Eustace's voice hissed with pent-up hatred. "The wizard is dead. Your imprisonment will be repaid with your life." The old grudge in him flared. Cletus paused his prying and joined the shout. "Human, the smell of power on you disgusts me. I will burn you to ash." The volcano responded by belching hotter, fiercer flames. At the same time, the other Zaz brothers muttered a spell and aimed it squarely at Clark. The magic hit him directly. Even as he tried to resist, his biofield and superhuman body ebbed away. Clark's face went white as his powers vanished just like Diana's had. Damn it! But Clark had prepared. Before leaving, he and David had agreed on a contingency. Deprived of his alien powers, Clark still had a tool. He had the lantern ring. Wearing it, he materialized in a suit of green energy and steadied himself above the city. "Your ambition to destroy the world will never be fulfilled," he said coldly, voice gruff with strain. David hovered nearby. He too had lost some strength, but much less than Clark. "It helped," Clark asked quietly, eyeing him. "It has an effect, yes, but limited," David replied. He felt weaker by a measure, a tenth or two. Yet his command of magic and the 6 gods' power blunted the demon's onslaught. Clark's famously low magic resistance had made him an easy target for the demon's trick, while David's ability to absorb magic left him far less affected. Eustace, unwilling to take the claim at face value, lunged. A great batwing stirred up a gale, and he dove toward David like an arrow. "I will torment your soul for 10,000 years, Overman." "Tens of thousands of years of imprisonment have filled you with rage," David replied, voice flat. He made no show of fear. "I won't seal you again. I'll grant you eternal release." The threat chilled Eustace's grin. The Zaz brothers advanced on Clark, eager to test if the ring would be enough. "Kid, let's see your tricks," one sneered. Clark charged, green fist forward, while David faced Eustace's dive. Kara clenched her jaw and surged toward Cletus at the volcano's summit. The 2 sides matched off. The air above the city tore into a furious battle as powers, some still present, some newly called into being, collided with ancient, bitter hatred. Fawcett City burned around them, but the fight had begun in earnest. Overman didn't seem to be affected by that demon's spell. At the foot of the volcano, Flash whooped. When David and the reinforcements arrived, they immediately saw what was happening and watched closely. Diana and the others, who had tensed when Superman went powerless, finally exhaled in relief. Overman, hovering in the air, hadn't even wavered. Even if Superman's lost his powers, as long as Overman is still standing, that's something, Arthur said in a low voice. When crises the League couldn't face threatened the world, Overman had solved countless of them alone. So long as Overman holds, the world hasn't ended. Cyborg's eyes, though weak, glinted with renewed hope. Who's that girl Overman and Superman brought with them? She isn't affected either, and she's dressed like Superman. Has anyone seen her before? Hal Jordan leaned against a boulder nearby, catching his breath. The others exchanged looks and shook their heads. All they could tell was that the girl had an unusual bond with Superman. Inside his suit, an exhausted Batman glanced at Supergirl Kara, then focused on David's fight. He used the lull to recover. He wouldn't put all his hopes on Overman and walk away. But he still quietly hoped David could at least wear down a few demons. Whoosh, Used moved with flash-like speed. His talons sliced the air in a killing arc. David sidestepped calmly, grabbed a wing, spun, and flung him. Ustu's tall body went out of control and slammed into the volcano, gouging a deep crater. Molten lava splashed everywhere, but the 1,000-degree flow did nothing to the demon's body. As Ustu tried to flap his bat wings back up, a scorching, dense beam of energy slammed into him with crushing impact and searing pain, pinning him to the ground. Ustu screamed. His form exploded into dark blue mist so the destructive ray could pass through. The mist drifted a dozen meters before reconstituting. His chest was blackened, but the wound wasn't fatal. He scowled. That spell didn't affect his core at all. David raised an eyebrow. These demons' power rivaled that of the 7 deadly sins, former archdemons of hell, and each had unique, dangerous abilities. Ustu melted into mist, reappearing to lash out with lightning speed. Every time David struck, the demon dissolved into unresisting dark mist, letting the attack pass through, then instantly reassembled. His mist seemed to be fully controlled by his will. The particles separated to allow passes and then recombined, and he showed strong resistance to David's gravity manipulation. After all, gravity's pull scales with mass, and a mist has hardly any. For a while, the only damage David managed was the charred mark on Ustu's chest from before. Then, as blows traded, Ustu slowed for a beat. His eyes flared, and he slashed at David's chest. He only tore David's suit and left 3 faint scratches. David had deliberately let his guard drop to create an opening, but it still wasn't enough. When his steel arm whipped through, Ustu dissolved into mist at the last second and avoided it. Dozens of meters away, he reformed, clutching bleeding claws, wincing. It's like grabbing some indestructible God-forged artifact. No, worse, Ustu hissed. He realized he couldn't harm David directly. His attacks glanced off or hurt himself. Maybe only extremely fragile spots like eyes or eardrums could be damaged. Before he could think more, David surged forward, wind roaring around him, and punched. Let's see how many times you can dodge. Swish, swish, swish. Ustu could only weave and evade against David's barrage. It was like a swarm of gnats harassing a rampaging bull, annoying but not dangerous, unless the bull misstepped and crushed many at once. Sweating, the ancient demon who'd once ruled a region felt like he was walking a razor's edge. Meanwhile, Clark's power, already unstable thanks to the Jas brothers' spell, was being systematically broken. Their magic, though potent, had physically weak bodies, but Superman, now weakened, found himself pushed to the limit. The 3-headed demon tried to press the advantage, but an unseen force yanked him back, allowing Clark to dodge a lethal blow. "It's you, the wizard's successor," the Jas brothers bellowed, turning and attacking David. David simply reached out and punched one of the heads in the chest. The force shattered ribs. The 3-headed demon coughed blood and was hurled backward. David didn't pause to gloat. Ignoring Ustu's talon on his back, he stood like a mountain and unleashed an eye blast of blazing energy that struck the Jas brothers. The blow nearly severed an arm. greenish-brown demon blood splattered across the volcanic slopes. "My arm!" one head screeched, clutching at the ruined limb, skin blackened and cracked. Clark's eyes suddenly lit with hope, and he flew forward. "Now I can handle this." On the volcano's summit, Kara slammed her fist into Cletus's chest and drove him back so hard his legs gouged 2 trenches. The spot she'd hit looked like red-hot iron whose crust had been cracked open to reveal molten fury within. "It's useless," Cletus snarled, then slashed with his great blade. Kara, still adjusting to her present body, didn't take it straight on. She dodged and countered with a backhand punch. Her blows landed with terrifying force. For the moment, her power matched and even exceeded Clark's. Kryptonian men and women don't differ drastically in raw strength, and Kara was a few years older, her body more mature. But every punch she drove at Cletus seemed only to strengthen him. He gleamed brighter, hotter, as if each strike stoked some inner furnace. "What kind of monster are you?" Kara demanded. She'd never seen anything like it, not even on Krypton. "Monster," Cletus roared. "I ruled this world before you hairless apes even knew how to bend iron." He spat a dragon-like torrent of scorching fire at her. Kara dodged but felt her hair singe. Her arm blistered badly. As an ancient demon, Cletus's flames weren't ordinary fire, and Kara's relatively low magic resistance left her vulnerable. "I'm not from this planet," she shouted, throat raw, and punched again. The blow nearly landed, but Cletus's strength surged, and he managed to block, then riposte. He rode the flowing lava like a river, controlling it. Kara's strikes only fed him, made him stronger. Unevenly seasoned in battle and momentarily flustered, she found herself driven back. Clark and David had briefly explained the situation to her on the way over. Kara had thought that because she wasn't weakened by the demon's magic, she'd be the one to tip the scales. Instead, she was hitting a creature who seemed to grow with every strike. "This is the power of great Cletus. Your attacks make me stronger, like an active volcano. Touch it and you'll be destroyed," Cletus bellowed, swinging his blade. "Once I finish you so-called heroes, I'll turn this world back into a lava waste." "Is that so?" A cold voice cut through. A bolt of lightning hammered Cletus and sent him flying. David stood there, wrapped in thunder, like a god of storms. That flash of divine power did more than hurt Cletus. It struck Eustu's dark blue mist as well, making him twitch and slow. The lightning forced Eustu back into his physical form, clutching his bruised chest, panicked. David remembered what the wizard's successor was supposed to do. This was the old magic's work. It restrained demonic forms. He unleashed more divine lightning into the mist, scattering electricity through it. Every time Eustu tried to dissolve into mist, David struck with lightning that could bind demons and force them back. The thunder-locked fists smashed into the reformed demon and hurled him aside. A barrel-sized torrent of cosmic energy pounded his chest. David kept his palm raised and hammered the assaults home. When Eustu dissolved, he'd hit the mist. When Eustu reformed, he'd be hit harder. "This won't do," Eustu screamed as an iron fist sheared through him, distorting his face and sending him careening. Several fangs were knocked out. If David were merely the wizard's successor in name, the demon wouldn't have feared him, but stripped of his mist and facing David's nearly indestructible superbody, Eustu was in trouble. Speed alone couldn't match David's gravity and energy attacks. Then a massive gravitational field erupted, enveloping the sky above the volcano like an invisible titan's hand. "Let go of me." The Jaws brothers howled as the purple-lit human youth produced a terrifying magnetic field and began pulling several ancient demons toward him. From his stance, it was clear he intended to finish them all himself, to end it quickly. Compared to Clark, who David could handle even injured, the Jaws brothers saw David as a world serpent opening a bloody maw. They shrieked and cast spell after spell, power deprivation, corruption, curses, mental confusion, anything to stop him. The weakening effect didn't increase. The spells dropped into David like into an abyss and made no difference. The first to be dragged in was the weakest of them, one of the Joss brothers. David's overwhelming pull shattered the middle head, skull caving with a sickening crack. "Joss!" the remaining head screamed. David's hands closed on the neck. Lightning flared from his eyes and then cleaved the remaining 2 heads free. The 3-headed body convulsed and died. The demon souls spilled free and fled in scattered wisps. but divine lightning struck and annihilated them. The three wisps of black smoke evaporated. Joss brothers, used to, struggling against the gravity that now tried to pull him in, stared in horror and fury. This world was ours once. You humans stole it from us. 10,000 years ago, the wizards of the Council of Eternity had sealed them away. Now the wizard's successor was going to obliterate their souls. Does that concern me? David said coldly, glancing at Cletus, who had plunged his great blade into the volcano and seemed to be siphoning its power to resist. David didn't care about ancient ownership. I only know you want to destroy this world. He snapped his fingers and a bolt of divine lightning lanced out. Yustu's body stiffened, racked by lightning, and the gravity finished what the magic had started. Like a meteor trapped by a planet's pull, he was dragged inexorably toward David. If you destroy this world, where will my family and I live? Chapter 173, Rob the Wolf, 4K. David discovered that the power of the six gods suppressed the ancient demons terribly, especially Yustu, whose ability to turn into smoke and evade attacks was now useless. The tide of battle turned fast. Divine lightning struck Yustu, preventing him from spreading into mist. The demon couldn't beat David's gravity and was pulled toward him. The air detonated. Shockwaves ripped across the sky. Citizens in the city clenched their hands and prayed, watching the fight on the volcano and hoping the Overman could finish the demon who had created it. David's fist, like a meteor from beyond the heavens, crashed into Yustu's chest and abdomen. The demon's eyes bulged, blood spattered from his mouth. Yustu had never met anyone this powerful. Not even some of the gods he'd encountered in ancient times had been comparable. Deprived of his mist form, he finally felt David's raw, brutal strength. David gripped Yustu by the throat. Lightning crawled across his palm and engulfed the demon, preventing any escape or dispersion. "Disperse, now," David barked. Yustu strained to break free and rain himself into smoke, but the grip held. Fists like colliding planets struck his face in a relentless barrage. Blood sprayed. Just as Yustu was about to lose consciousness, a scorching torrent of lava roared over, a wall of molten rock that smashed the two apart. "Let him go!" David emerged unscathed. The 1,000-degree lava did not harm him. Surfing the magma, Cletus came charging, knife raised, trying to rescue Yustu. "Take me away, Yustu!" he shouted. Even hot-headed Cletus felt a prickle of fear at David's power. He was the only ancient demon there who couldn't fly. If anyone was going to get away from David, it had to be Yustu. Cletus abandoned his plan to return the world to lava, for now. "Where do you think you're going? None of you are leaving today." David seized Cletus's blazing knife in one hand and slammed a lightning-wreathed fist into his chest. The impact drove Cletus like a meteor through the mountain's belly. He tore through the volcano and flew out the other side. "Wow, this power is too strong, beyond my limits." Cletus coughed blood-laced lava, horror written across his face. He could normally turn blows against others into strength, but David's attack bypassed that and nearly broke him. Yustu, now free, didn't even bother to help Cletus. He turned and fled in blind panic. Shazam! David left an afterimage and reappeared before him, seizing his neck again. Blinding bolts of thick lightning struck down from the sky. A titanic surge of Shazam power scorched Yustu black. Acrid smoke poured from every orifice. David's iron hand plunged into a chest that had become rotten charcoal and shattered the demon's heart. Yustu screeched, his voice a mix of agony and terror. "Heir to the wizard's power. I'll serve you, master. With me you can know everyone's secrets." Stripped of his body, Yustu writhed and tried to flee. "It's true. I can read memories and secrets when I touch someone. Don't kill me. I know yours too." David's expression hardened, colder than before. Yustu, desperate, shouted to the sky in a last gambit. "Listen, the Overman's real name is David." Crack! Lightning lanced through the heavens. Yustu's words were cut off as a spear of divine lightning annihilated him mid-sentence. "Now it's your turn," David said, his gaze like a blade as it swung to Cletus. The demon trembled. He slammed his knife deep into the volcano. The mountain, already churning, erupted in a blast that threatened to rain lava across the city. "Superheroes save the people!" Cletus laughed crazily, turning to leap down the mountain while David dealt with the eruption. He thought he could flee while David had other priorities. He didn't understand David's range. "This level isn't enough," David muttered. He reached out and clenched his hand. An invisible, titanic grip seized the lava and shoved it back into the crater. The eruption that would have drowned the city was quelled by raw, terrifying power. If it had been a supervolcano capable of swallowing the globe, he might have been helpless. But this eruption, only a few thousand meters high, was contained. "Did you forget about us?" Clark and Kara answered as they intercepted Cletus's escape route. They struck together, a double blow that hurled Cletus back toward the mountaintop before he could land. No, Cletus felt himself falling through the sky. A massive hand closed on the back of his neck and held him. He tried to swing his knife, but his arm was seized. Shazam! David grabbed him and growled. Consecutive bolts of transformation lightning descended, reducing Cletus to charcoal. David used the life-risking move Captain Marvel only dared as a last resort, as if it were a casual gesture. The divine lightning obliterated Cletus so thoroughly his soul could not reform. The air reeked of char and sulfur. David casually tossed the corpse aside. Unlike the 7 deadly sins, these ancient demons had already extinguished their hosts' souls when they invaded. The writhing bodies were empty husks. David showed no mercy. "Is it over?" Clark exhaled when he saw the 3 demons gone. The absence of the power that had threatened them all eased the tension at once. When the volcano had erupted, the city had frozen in terror. Now, as the last thunder faded, the crowd erupted into cheers. "Why haven't my abilities returned?" Barry Allen circled restlessly. After running around, he felt no hint of super speed. His legs felt like an ordinary, out-of-shape college student's. He worried he might have lost his powers for good. "It should come back with time," Hal Jordan said, grim. "I just don't know how long. I hope I'm not going to be crippled for the next few days." Regardless, the immediate crisis was over. Kara listened to the chanting and cheers for the Justice League and for David, who had turned the tide. A few voices singled her out and thanked her as well. "Being a superhero, it feels pretty good," she admitted. As the cleanup continued, David moved the remainder of the volcano. Clark and Kara, their strength already returning after exposure to the sun, helped him carry the mountain's mass and sink it to the ocean floor. "Come with me, Kara," Clark said with a sunny grin above the Pacific. "You just arrived on Earth and probably don't have a place to stay yet. Come see where I grew up. You can stay with us until you find what you want." "Can I?" she asked, a little shy and moved. "Of course, your family," David said, smiling. Comforted by their words, Kara accepted. Jonathan and Martha Kent welcomed her the way only small-town Midwesterners could. They fussed over her, their warmth immediate and disarming. Martha set a steaming blueberry pie on the table and winked. "Don't be shy, Kara. Make yourself at home. After dinner, David and Clark will clean up the attic for you. I hope you like pie. It's nothing like the food from your world, but it's made with love." The family gathered around the table. They chatted and laughed, and for the first time since leaving Krypton, Kara felt something like home. "No, no, I'll smash you all to pieces," a voice boomed from halfway across the galaxy. In a space mercenary bar after a long night of drinking, a tall, muscular tough with shaggy, lion-like hair, a gray-skinned, scarred brute named Lobo, lay sprawled on a sofa, reeking of alcohol and smoke. He thrashed and roared in his sleep. "You're having nightmares again, Lobo?" Someone on another sofa teased, clutching a bottle. Lobo jerked awake, brutally pushed a barmaid off him, bit down on a thick cigar and lit it. He rubbed his temples, still half drunk, annoyed and with a pounding headache. "That's weird. I drink in this joint and never get good dreams. Always nightmares. Are you saying the most brutal mercenary in the universe is a coward?" The bar filled with famed mercenaries. Some laughed nervously. "Lobo, tell us what your nightmares are like." "In my dream, I was surrounded by 1,000 enemies, all armed." Lobo's scarlet eyes flashed. He slammed the bar counter and cracked it. "I blew 998 of them to bits with my favorite blaster. Can't find the last 2. Total crap." The bar trembled at his outburst. People exchanged looks and half smiles. "That is your nightmare?" Lobo shrugged. "Dreams suck. You can't smash heads to pieces in a dream. Boring as a barrel of weak wine." An elegant, fanged alien woman with a beast-like head entered, flanked by heavily armed bodyguards. Harley, Lobo's agent and a notorious deal-maker, strolled in like she owned the place. "Morning, Lobo. Seeing you early is like a miracle." Lobo's grin widened. Heh, feeling charitable today, Harley? What have you got? She chuckled and cupped her fanged mouth, turning on the charm. No mercenary in the universe can refuse this payout. Trust me, Lobo, the reward is obscene. Who's on the menu? Lobo asked, stretching and raising an eyebrow. No killing, Harley replied. Lobo scowled. No killing? Someone's put up a sky-high bounty to travel to a place called Earth in the Milky Way and capture 2 rare life forms. She let the whole bar, because to Harley, no one else mattered much compared to Lobo. How rare? Lobo puffed on his cigar, thumb pointed at himself. If rare mattered, I'd be the universe's protected species. But this time I earned my status. I'm getting picky. Every mercenary in the room listened with sudden, tight attention. The Zarnians had been a race of near immortals until Lobo had slaughtered his own kind and become the sole survivor of his race. Legends of his violence had spread across the stars. A Kryptonian orphan, Harley said, extending a finger for emphasis. Yes, a living Kryptonian. Hard to believe any survived that old planetary mess, huh? Lobo's cigar tilted. A rare seriousness crossed his mad face. Never tried smashing a Kryptonian skull. Wonder if their bones sound different when they crack? Clearer? Heavier? He rubbed his chin, genuinely curious like a connoisseur. Would be a learning experience. Harley snapped her fingers. But the employer values the other target even more than the Kryptonian. Lobo blinked, intrigued. Who is it? Harley smiled and leaned in. A young Taoist priest from Qingyun Mountain, Chang Temple. He travels between worlds, the immortal world and the mortal world, living like a bridge between them. Power, wealth, beauty, transient to him. One mountain, one temple, one man, one bear. The employer says capturing him is a prize beyond imagining. Lobo's eyes gleamed at the thought of something new to break, or possibly ransom. Harley finished with a flourish. The employer's price will make any sane mercenary drool. No killing. Capture alive. Go to Earth and bring back both of them. Lobo laughed, a wild, hungry sound. Finally, a job worth waking up for. Chapter 174, Destroyer of Worlds. The priority for capture is higher than the last Kryptonian? Interesting. What's so special about him? Does he have the most muscular, strongest physique in the entire universe? Lobo struck a pose and narcissistically flexed his thick biceps like a rock star. Aurelia gave a dry smile and tapped the screen on her wrist, sending the mission dossier to the communicator on his waist. She added a pointed reminder. The employer wants them alive, not 2 corpses with smashed heads. Damn it! What a nightmare, Lobo complained. Now that the target finally promised a little challenge, he couldn't kill anyone. He scratched his ear. I take it back. Sometimes reality is as annoying as a dream. After draining a large mug of beer, he casually tossed it behind him like a mad cowboy taking a bounty on a ride to the Badlands. He put 2 fingers to his mouth and let out a long whistle. My darling, time to roll. Boom, vroom. With a heavy roar, a massive motorcycle built for space, bristling with chrome and menace, broke through the bar door, slid into a perfect drift, and stopped in front of him. Amid the gasps of the scattering patrons, Lobo swung into his black-studded jacket and onto his space hog. He twisted the throttle to the stops and leapt into the starry sky in a streak of light for a space jump. Let's go. I hope this job is fun. This mission is our first. We cannot fail. Inside a skull-shaped ship, a nearly 2-meter-tall woman stood, her skin ashen like bone ash and her long hair the color of dried blood. Her nose was short and broad like a lion's. Her pupils were obsidian and cold, betraying no pity or weakness. She slowly wiped a broadsword the size of a door panel and addressed the others in a low, menacing voice. It was Master who released us from the lab and gave us new life. We must not disappoint him, even in death. Combat, slaughter, conquest, these are in our blood. We possess the power of gods. The Kryptonians created us to do what even they could not. A towering, leopard-headed brute with a human body and saber-toothed fangs extended a talon between his fingers. His eyes flashed with savage relish. Ryan, don't worry. My talon can tear through Kryptonian skin. Even a Kryptonian under a yellow sun would be as helpless before me as a lamb before a tiger. Planet Destroyer. That's what they call us. They stitched us from the genes of captured cosmic predators. They feared us, created us, and then didn't dare wake us. A slender female form with a dinosaur-like head, covered in hard green scales, twitched two tentacled arms ending in scorpion stingers, and sneered like a viper. Her toxins could turn a world into a lifeless husk. Why did Master put a bounty out for that mercenary to hit the target and make us wait in the shadows? We could have done it ourselves. Unnecessary procedure, said the last of the four. Genderless and lithe, it floated slightly above the deck, a pair of energy wings shimmering from its back. Pale-skinned and androgynous like some fallen angel, its voice was curt. Master has arranged the plan. We only need to execute it. The genetic variant named Overman, the Kryptonian Orphan, and Lobo, all three are biological specimens Master needs for his path to perfection. Ryan finished polishing the broadsword. A cold, hair-raising gleam ran along the blade as he laughed. Let them wear each other down. The mission's outcome will be more secure. How are you settling in? David and Clark walked with Kara through the woods beside the small town and the farm where she had been staying. The countryside smells were foreign to her, but she seemed to fit the setting. Jeans, a red plaid shirt, breeze-tossed hair, more at ease than David expected. Very well, Kara said, smiling as she looked toward the distant yellow sun. The hillside grass was bright and insects and birds sang in the trees. The sun and the scenery are different from Krypton. Kandor had been a concrete jungle of soaring towers and a rigid class system. Its red sun cast a harsher light. The yellow sun, by contrast, felt warmer, gentler. Compared to Krypton's cold, stifling city life, Earth felt like freedom. But Kara's smile faltered, and a shadow crossed her face. She lowered her eyes. How lovely it would be if her parents and relatives were here to see this planet, but she knew that was impossible now. Clark hesitated. He wanted to tell her the truth, that her father, Zor-El, still existed in some form. But the timing felt wrong. Zor-El had been transformed into a cyborg. He no longer recognized anyone and could not communicate. Seeing him would only deepen Kara's sorrow. If only there was a way to bring Uncle El back to himself. David heard the unspoken thoughts between Clark and himself. They had all discussed Zor-El's condition. Maybe dismantling his mechanical shell would let his remaining flesh recover and restore his hippocampus, where memories were stored. But Kryptonians don't heal like humans. Without life-sustaining machinery, Zor-El might die outright. The Dionysus factor might grant regeneration and near immortality, but it may not work on him, David said. A Kryptonian body is like steel compared to ordinary flesh. The energetic cost to repair it is enormous. The Dionysus factor could struggle to manage that. A soft chime from their lantern rings interrupted the conversation. David and Clark both checked their messages. Batman had sent an invitation. It wasn't a distress call, just a polite summons. Disasters were breaking out around the globe, and the League was short-handed. The Justice League planned to expand and wanted David and Clark as founding members to review applicants and advise who to admit. Expanding recruitment? Clark said, surprised but pleased. Even at his speed, he couldn't be everywhere at once. It would help prevent situations where people go unrecovered because we're understaffed. David frowned. The League was young, and its systems were imperfect. Rapid expansion felt sudden. He'd noticed another trend. Since the Justice League and its members had repeatedly saved the world, new superheroes had stopped hiding and were appearing publicly to fight crime. It might not be just a manpower issue. Clark and Kara looked at him. He explained, lately the White House has been pushing media coverage of a cluster of new, unfamiliar heroes, almost as if they're trying to form their own Justice League. Batman was probably trying to corral talent, David suspected, to ensure the League had reliable people of good character. Service to one's country can be a powerful incentive. I don't think that's the whole story, Clark said, puzzled. David's gaze drifted to the trees. Batman prepares for the worst. If official bodies can recruit and control superheroes, they create a way to replace or restrain unregulated heroes. When there are enough personnel and the right conditions to replace or control them, a conflict between the two sides is bound to happen. They walked on under the yellow sun, each thinking of the tensions ahead. Missions that demanded living captives, engineered predators waking to slaughter, a father trapped in a machine, and a world where the lines between heroism and control were beginning to blur. Chapter 175, Select New Members. So we need more chairs? Barry Allen looked surprised in the Justice League hall. New friends? How exciting. How big are we expanding? Do we need a new table? Arthur, still smelling faintly of salt from breaking up a Coastal Arms deal, slid into his usual chair and scanned the round table. This one only seats a dozen or so. Since the Justice League was founded, we've handled countless disasters around the globe and saved innumerable people, Batman said, chin resting on his folded hands, his voice grave. But there are always some threats even we can't handle alone. Isn't there Overman? Hal Jordan munched from a bag of chips. The Guardian had assigned Hal to monitor certain heroes, but he'd let his duty slide. How could he watch someone who'd already saved the planet so many times? If asked, he'd say everything was fine. Today, David and Clark had come to the meeting together, curious about the recruitment. We should recruit members who are on call with the League full-time. Batman glanced at David. David raised an eyebrow. Those words were pointed. Clark shifted beside him, uncertain. There was no question David's power and contributions were unquestionable, but since the League began, he'd rarely taken part in daily patrols. His attendance at meetings could be counted on one hand. His absence had become the norm. We can't rely on Overman every time we run into trouble we can't solve, Batman continued quietly. The role of a fire captain isn't an easy one, and it isn't fair to put that burden on him alone. More importantly, what if we can't reach him? What if he's delayed? Everyone except David fell silent. It was a problem that couldn't be ignored. If Overman didn't show, would they simply wait for death? Counting on a single rescuer was a dangerous habit. In the long run, it could cost lives, both theirs and those they were sworn to protect. Diana calmly wiped her godkiller sword. When she'd lived on Paradise Island, her mother had told her how frail humans needed protection from the gods. Since leaving the island, she'd come to understand just how vast the outside world was. Sometimes the dangers people faced were more than even gods could handle. I can't promise I'll always arrive in time to save every League member and every person in a disaster, she said. David spread his hands. He agreed. If the League grew stronger, there would be fewer crises he personally needed to solve, and he wouldn't mind taking things a bit easier. So our criteria for recruiting this time should be maximum power? Flash asked. That's one part, Cyborg said. The other is character. He tapped a sequence on his arm and projected over a dozen holographic figures above the table. I scanned public records and applications, without revealing anyone's real identities, to pull together their files. From their past deeds and statements, we can screen who should join the League. Like ID cards, the projections showed avatars, powers, and histories. Black Canary, Blue Devil, Element Woman, Firestorm, Black Lightning, Vixen, Hawkgirl. David's eyes traced the list. A few names were familiar, and one, Hawkgirl, caught his attention. He remembered Thanagar and agents sent to Earth, yet Cyborg's files labeled her as an Earthling, an inconsistency to note. Blue Devil, is he really okay? Barry asked, pointing nervously at one entry. Blue skin, pointed horns, crimson eyes, an appearance straight out of horror. After dealing with ancient demons recently, the team bristled at the idea of another. Dan Patrick Cassidy, Cyborg read aloud. A devout Catholic and a professional stuntman. During a shoot, he accidentally released a demon. Its power fused with his stunt suit and granted him superhuman abilities. A devout believer? Arthur said thoughtfully. The room fell quiet. The words reminded them of past fanatics. That reminds me of two cases from before. Everyone exchanged looks, knowing what he meant. Redemption and Hai Tuohua, zealots who nearly brainwashed the world. If not for Overman, the consequences might have been catastrophic. All right, move on, Batman said. The combination of demonic power and devout faith made them cautious, but Cyborg continued through the roster. Hal rubbed his chin. We should bring more women into the League to balance things out. He raised an eyebrow deliberately. And I don't think the League has a rule against teammates dating, does it? Cyborg choked on the question. No, Hal. There's no rule. He cleared his throat and continued. Black Canary, Black Lightning, Vixen. Some of the applicants are strong, some less so. David tapped his finger on the table. Many of the names Cyborg projected had been part of League rosters in different storylines. In practice, many heroes cycled through, but only 7 or 8 remained permanent fixtures. The team studied the profiles Hal had mentioned. Black Canary, could emit a supersonic sonic scream. Black Lightning carried metahuman genes that allowed him to generate lethal black electricity when triggered later in life. Vixen carried the Tantu Totem, an heirloom given to an ancestor by Anansi. By touching it, she could channel the abilities of any animal. The League isn't just about raw power, Batman said, but the threats we face are extraordinary. Bringing in teammates who aren't up to the task could be dangerous. His voice carried weight. The others leaned in, taking the selection as seriously as their leader. David's lips curved into a faint smile at Batman's caution. There was respect in the room for both the caution and the urgency of their decision. Chapter 176, The Best Bounty Hunter in the Universe. David allowed a small smile at the corner of his mouth. The real world wasn't like the comics. In the pages, Batman, at the peak of human conditioning, could trade blows with world-destroying villains, even spar a little with Darkseid and roll away from his Omega beams. In reality, without outside help, Batman facing an apocalypse invasion would be reduced to scavenging a laser pistol and cutting down cannon fodder. Now Batman relies on his trained body and his gadgets for Gotham's street crime. Against truly powerful foes, he suits up in the Fenrir armor. Thanks to his wealth, Batman could buy Fenrir, which put him among the League's heavy hitters. The three people David had pointed out were capable, strong street-level heroes, but not the kind you'd want facing a planetary or cosmic threat. To avoid complications, and frankly for their own safety, it's better not to let them join the League. A brief flicker passed through his eyes. Because of the changes he'd set in motion, the League had formed earlier and already faced harsher enemies. If members weren't careful, someone could die. After much deliberation, only 3 candidates remained: Firestorm, Element Woman, and Hawkgirl. As the League debated whether to narrow the roster further or accept all 3, all powerful enough to draw attention, Cyborg's expression suddenly shifted, and he looked up. An unidentified object has entered Earth. As the League's own living network, Cyborg could process 1,000 streams at once. He'd built a global early warning system across communication satellites. A low-orbit satellite had just tracked something blinking into the atmosphere from deep space. Its speed and vacuum reached relativistic levels. After hitting the atmosphere, it decelerated to about 260 times the speed of sound. Projecting its trajectory, it'll be over Metropolis in a few seconds. Everyone stiffened. Few beings or machines reached relativistic speeds. It wouldn't be Brainiac, would it? Flash asked, voice tight. When a threat from space appeared, minds went to the bottled world alien who had once said he would return. No, Cyborg replied. By the time they spoke, the object had already arrived. Lobo roared in on a flaming space motorcycle, executed an extravagant drift, and hung above Metropolis. He casually removed his shades and looked around like a guy scouting a bar, not like a paid killer on a mission. Cyborg projected the satellite feed into the hall. A rocker? Hal Jordan looked surprised. If you ignored the hovering motorcycle and the alien skin tone and eyes, you could mistake him for an earthbound biker. Leather, studs, black face paint, and a heavy machine. He doesn't look hostile. Maybe he's a friendly alien. Flash watched Lobo's relaxed grin and then whispered, "Lobo." David's face changed. He recognized the alien instantly. The skin, the attitude, the clothes, impossible to miss. Lobo, the greatest bounty hunter in the universe. One of the few whose power rivals the son of Krypton. He's almost absurdly hard to kill. He can regenerate from a single drop of blood. His soul can even exist outside his body or possess other beings while keeping his abilities. In many ways, he's more trouble than the Kryptonian. He's not exactly friendly because he's polite, David continued. Slaughter and madness run in his veins. It's instinct, as natural to him as eating or drinking. His words hit everyone cold. He can hum a tune while slaughtering an entire planet. How do you know? Did he do that? Arthur asked. David's next lines made their faces go white with horror. That Lobo had once destroyed his homeworld. The records said he never failed a contract. Overman's right. He's the universe's deadliest mercenary. The archives are full of missions, sick with blood and violence. There's basically nothing he won't do to get paid. Hal's face drained of color as he scrolled Lobo's dossier on his lantern ring. Hundreds of pages of missions, atrocities, and a level of brutality that was stomach-turning. Down on the streets of Metropolis, people first erupted into panic, then quickly shifted into another mood when Lobo's look and bike registered as rockstar cliché. What is that? A flying motorcycle? Who made that? So cool. The lines. I want one. The crowd assumed it was a publicity stunt. Lobo sneered at the throng below, puffed on his cigar, and pulled a handful of weird green seeds from his belt. He flicked them casually onto the pavement. The pea-like seeds burrowed on contact, sprouted monstrously fast, and in an instant grew into dozens of meter-high carnivorous plants. Their huge, leering heads cast dark shadows over the street. Citizens froze, then broke into panicked flight, some wishing they had 2 more legs to run faster. Help! Those crimson predatory eyes made it clear. This wasn't a publicity stunt. I'll stop him, Clark barked and launched himself toward the city. And me. With a streak of yellow, Barry Allen was gone, racing to save people from the ravenous flora. The rest snapped into action, checking gear and moving out. This would be a brutal fight. The universe's greatest mercenary didn't earn that title by failing. And who knew how many hidden tricks Lobo had? David activated his enhanced vision, piercing obstacles to study the scene above Metropolis. He rubbed his chin, a faint glow in his eyes. This wasn't random. What would attract someone like Lobo to this relatively isolated planet and then aim him straight for Metropolis? Lobo hadn't immediately attacked beyond unleashing the bioweapons. He was smoking and watching the chaos, almost bored, as if waiting for prey to come to him. David's thought tightened into a question. Is he here for Clark and me? Chapter 177. You have nothing to do with Uncle Robert. Whoosh! A scorching beam of heat vision tore from the horizon, cutting cleanly through several giant, man-eating plants, rampaging across Metropolis. A streak of yellow light flickered along the pavement as Flash whisked civilians from the surrounding streets miles away. Leaving 2 streaks of friction in his wake, he slowed to a stop and looked up solemnly at the man on the heavy motorcycle hovering in the sky. Universe's first mercenary, I'm afraid you're about to have a big fight, Clark said. The last of the Kryptonian bloodline. You actually showed up, Lobo grunted, glancing down at Flash without much concern. He puffed on his cigar and looked Clark over like a hunter sizing up prey. Seems Harry's mission guide wasn't lying. A little destruction in the city, and the target shows himself. He shaded his eyes, lounging on his motorcycle with a swagger, barely masking his amusement. But isn't there supposed to be 2? My contract said 2 targets. You're after me? Clark tightened his fists. Somebody in the universe had put a bounty on him? The other obvious target, Clark realized, was David, who would be drawn out by this kind of chaos as surely as he was. Rumble. Dark clouds rolled in and gathered, the sky turning suddenly gray as silver forks of lightning laced the clouds. With a crack of thunder and a jagged bolt, David's lithe, powerful figure appeared in midair. His eyes were cold, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of something enormous, making the very air tremble and the wind fall to a hush. Lobo, don't think immortality makes you immune to consequences. You know me? Lobo barked, surprised that someone from a backwater planet would know his name. He pointed to himself theatrically. In response to David's challenge, he laughed loud and harsh. If you know me, you know there's nothing Lobo won't do in the whole damn universe. He stomped the throttle and the space bike's engine roared. Sparks flew as it tore through the air like a blazing comet. Lobo swung a wicked chain in his hand, the kind of lawless, violent move that belonged in a biker gang, then rocketed toward them, a fiery streak. A Gatling laser popped from the bike's nose and began to pour a rain of bullets. Clark hadn't planned to dodge, but the hail of projectiles stung like pebbles. He raised an arm to shield his eyes and rolled aside. I wasn't vaporized by a machine gun, he muttered. Looks like Kryptonians under a yellow sun are exactly as dangerous as the legends say. The thrill of a fight lit Lobo up. Hot air puffed from his nostrils as he lashed the long chain at Clark. Whack! Clark caught the chain. Pain flared up his arm as if it had been whipped. The 2 of them crossed paths, and Clark yanked hard, trying to wrest the mercenary from his bike. Kid, you're not even halfway grown, and you want to tussle with Grandpa Lobo? Lobo taunted. But an even greater force answered the pull. Lobo used Clark as a flail, attempting to swing him into David. David frowned, and with a deliberate motion, dropped a gravity field heavy as a mountain onto Lobo's motorcycle, instantly sapping its speed. Clark used the moment to free himself, brushing dust from his suit and steadying his drift through the air. "You bastard! What did you do to my motorcycle?" Lobo snarled. The bike crawled through the sky like an old cart. Furious, Lobo shouted as a purple torrent of cosmic energy engulfed him and slammed him off the motorcycle, sending him hurtling toward a distant skyscraper. "I guarantee you won't leave this planet in one piece, Lobo," David warned, lowering his hand. Lobo smashed through several buildings, carving a wide crater in the street below. He staggered out of the pit, brushed the dust from his jacket, and reached for his cigar, only to find his mouth empty. The cigar had been vaporized. "That was my favorite. I'll tear your lungs out, you joyless bastard." He whistled for his bike. Flying wasn't one of Lobo's innate powers. He needed that motorcycle. But before he could mount, Clark punched the bike. The impact sent it fluttering through the air, yet it neither bent nor exploded. It was built from something that shrugged off his blow. Clark's jaw tightened. Had the earlier laser fire weakened him? He watched, annoyed, as the bike, as if with a mind of its own, righted itself and flew back toward its master, flames stabilizing its trajectory. "Don't touch my beloved ride. If you've got the guts, come at me," Lobo howled, watching the two of them bat his bike back and forth like a toy. David's eyes flared with heat vision, and the beam struck near the engine. The metal glowed red-hot but held fast. Its hardness rivaled that of a divine artifact. Lobo bristled beneath, protective as any biker over his beloved machine. "You can't lay a finger on this," he spat. He stomped and launched himself skyward, chain whipping with barbed hooks aimed to bind David and pull him down. But David simply tugged, and the chain barely made his body sway before the force died. Lobo ended up hanging, flailing in midair. "Did your brain leak out when you were born?" David said icily. "You can't fly. What are you clipping on up there besides your own weight?" David seized the chain and swung it in a brutal arc. Lobo crashed back into the street, slamming into the asphalt and sending tremors through several blocks. Buildings shuddered. A crater dozens of meters across scarred the avenue. Lobo, coughing up blood, clawed to his feet. His wounds knitted instantly, but his curses were nonstop. He wiped spattered blood from his lips. "I like it. You can't keep Grandpa Lobo down." David grabbed the chain again, and with calm efficiency flung Lobo from one end of the block to the other. He used the mercenary as a battering ram, knocking down skyscrapers like dominoes. Chunks of tens of thousands of tons of concrete and glass tumbled, crashing onto the street in thunderous avalanches that kicked up dust clouds. Cars were flung like toys as the air pressure blasts rippled outward. Batman and Diana arrived on the scene, watching as whole buildings snapped and fell under the onslaught. Arthur stood choking on dust, staring at the man still attached to the chain, finally slammed into a massive crater. He looked shaken. "Don't tell me that even after all that, he's still alive," he said. Everyone else exchanged grim looks. None of them had ever seen David unleash this kind of raw, immediate power from the very beginning. Chapter 178. You're not as strong as a 60-year-old lady. The files show there are very few things in the universe that hurt Lobo, and most importantly, he has a bug-like power of accelerated regeneration. He can't be killed. Floating in midair, Green Lantern scrolled through the Corps' internal database. His eyes widened in disbelief. This is briefing material for Corps members tasked with keeping cosmic order. How can it be written like this? He shook his head. The report literally said the opponent was unkillable. What was a Green Lantern supposed to do if he ran into this lunatic? On the ground, Lobo casually stood up again, the shallow scrapes across his body knitting closed in an instant. David snorted. In the comics, Lobo was mostly comic relief, constantly provoking trouble, once daring to mess with Darkseid himself. "Maybe that's what immortality does to you," David said. "If you're immortal, who needs a brain? This is Grandpa Lobo's precious chain, the only one in the universe." Lobo thumped his boot into the pavement, planted his legs, and with a low roar, began to try and yank David down out of the sky like an arm wrestle. He hadn't given up on dragging him down. Clark's heat vision lanced at Lobo, like molten rock striking a steel bulkhead. Lobo just grinned and howled. "Hotter! Come on, little Kryptonian. Grandpa Lobo bathes in stars. Your heat's barely a warm bath." Lobo seemed to be luxuriating in the beams as if in a hot spring, making obscene, satisfied noises. You want more? Fine, I'll turn up the heat for you. Breaking free of the bit of restraint he'd been under, David shot thick energy beams from his eyes at Lobo. Not hot enough, he barked. Lobo's chest blackened and charred, but he remained stubborn, squinting and shouting back. Why do you look like a duck sizzling on a hot griddle, huh? Clark fired back, and Lobo's face flushed beet red. Too cold. I'm shivering, he taunted, then sniffed dramatically. Is that so? Then why do I smell roasted meat? David cut off his beams and kept his face impassive. He couldn't gain purchase in the air. Lobo's attempt to drag him down hadn't worked. Suddenly, a lasso woven from golden light flew out, wrapped around Lobo's neck, and yanked him backward. Wonder Woman had thrown the lasso of truth. Are you treating your Grandpa Lobo like a nagging old horse? He snarled. Lobo snapped his head back, and because Diana couldn't match his raw strength, she was jerked with him. He headbutted her squarely. The shockwave sent her flying and nearly unconscious, and she lost her hold on the lasso. Woman, your strength's still nowhere near mine, Grandpa Lobo, he sneered. Crude and brash as he was, Lobo was one of the universe's few fighting masters. He reached for something better. He wrenched the lasso of truth free and twirled it like a gunslinger, whistling. Batman, in the Fenrir armor, rocketed in with flame jets and threw a punch that hit like a tsunami. Lobo just lashed out with the lasso, snagged the armored arm, and flung Batman like a rag doll, taking Aquaman, Green Lantern, and Cyborg with him in the sweep. Only Flash managed to narrowly arch his back and avoid being pulverized. Barry's heart hammered. He'd been a hair's breadth from becoming pulp. Furious, he launched himself at Lobo, intending to use the Speed Force to take the mercenary down. Lobo had speed of his own, though not on Barry's level. He sent the lasso whipping into Flash's chest and sent him skidding dozens of meters backward. Barry hit the ground in a crumpled heap, coughing and uncertain how many ribs he'd broken. Too light. Feels like a blade of grass, Lobo grumbled, dissatisfied with the lasso's heft. If that had been his own chain, he said, that glowing whip would have shattered. Then David moved. An iron fist filled Lobo's vision. The blow detonated with the force of an avalanche. Lobo was blasted airborne, his body cutting a trench half a football field long through the street, trees, cars, and signs crushed to dust in his wake. He staggered up out of the pit, dazed and aching. When he looked down to where his head should be, his stomach lurched. His head had been twisted around so that he was looking straight at his own backside. He'd only just managed to swivel it back into place when Clark charged in with a raised fist. Lobo twisted his waist in time and slammed Clark away. Trying to ambush Grandpa Lobo? He crowed, proud of the move. Then the ground around Lobo dipped as if a great weight had settled. The asphalt crumpled, compressed to near steel. He tried to resist, but David's next punch hit like a falling planet. Windows shattered miles away, buildings trembled, and Lobo was slammed down again, his face split with blood, his nose broken. He lashed out, ferocious and furious, but David caught his fist with one hand and wouldn't budge. Impossible, Lobo thought. He pumped every ounce of fury and strength into pushing David away, veins standing out, every muscle at tension. But David simply stood with both feet planted and slowly moved Lobo's arm aside, as if it were a twig. Lobo, the self-proclaimed toughest guy in the universe, was suddenly rendered helpless, his dignity evaporating. "I'm gonna smash you!" he roared, swinging another punch. David snorted and caught that one too, calmly stretching his hands. Lobo strained until his eyes bulged, but the thick arms that should have been unstoppable were being peeled apart, unwillingly pulled wider and wider. Then, with a brutal echo of Lobo's earlier headbutt, David slammed his forehead into Lobo's. The move was delivered with unnerving calm. "Your strength isn't even as good as the 60-year-old lady who lives next door to me," David said, deadpan, returning to Lobo the exact mockery he'd used on Wonder Woman. Author's note, I wrote a bit slowly today, so the update is an hour late. I added a few hundred extra words. Sorry. I'll kill you. Lobo will kill you. The words were barely out when a head slammed back into the ground with a sickening crack. Lobo heard the sound of his own skull shattering, felt ringing in his ears, and saw blood blur his vision, but he didn't stop. Like a wild animal, he retaliated, flinging David away with a brutal punch. David steadied himself in midair and fired thick beams of energy from his eyes. The beams struck Lobo's blood-slick face and seared his eyes. Lobo, who had only just risen, staggered backward from the impact. Yellow lightning crackled as a sweeping kick buckled his legs and sent him crashing down. The Fenrir armor came down like a meteor, slamming into Lobo and pinning him deep in the earth. He just knocked Batman off him when Clark's arboreal blow hit. With his vision gone, Lobo was like a headless fly, helplessly taking hit after hit. The League moved as one, powerful, coordinated, but nothing they landed did real damage. "It's like punching leather wrapped around an iron ingot," Arthur said, face drawn, rubbing his hand. "My knuckles feel like they're breaking." Arthur shoved from behind, but Lobo barely flinched. The recoil hurt Arthur more than it hurt their target. Hal Jordan, hovering, tried to bring a giant hydraulic press to bear with his ring, only to have Lobo punch it to splinters. Cheap, hollow glass exploded into the air, and the blast tossed Hal end over end before he found his footing. Diana charged next, shield held like a battering ram, and hit Lobo so hard he flew hundreds of meters through a chain of skyscrapers. But Lobo's regained vision allowed him to punch her away as soon as he landed. "That's enough, Lobo. Don't think you're truly unkillable," David said, floating above the ruined street, calm and cold. The battle had already razed the surrounding blocks. Smoke and dust choked the air. Lobo sat on the ground and gave a defiant, obscene gesture to the sky. "What do you want?" he sneered. "Batman, Diana, get back!" David's voice hardened. He split through the air like a cannonball and struck Lobo so fast the killer didn't know what hit him. Lobo was knocked flat as a sapling in a storm, unable to resist. Clark and the others had never seen David like this before. There was real murder in him now, a dangerous, focused fury. "Quickly, retreat," they obeyed. David didn't pull his blows. He rained down fist after fist on the prone Lobo, each blow hammering the ground for hundreds of meters, sending pebbles leaping and pulverizing what was left of the criminal's skull. "Damn you," Lobo cursed, and then cut off mid-voice. After sustained, brutal strikes, his head, already a ruin, was finished off. David straightened, shook the blood from his fist, and looked down at the headless body sprawled beneath him. For a moment, Lobo's senses were all over the place. He could see through his soul, feel what he couldn't with flesh. But then David seized one thick, reaching arm, twisted, and snapped it off. The other arm went the same way, like a stick being broken. David grabbed Lobo by the collar, rocketed into the sky, and broke through the cloud layer. From orbit, he built a gravitational slingshot between Earth and the Sun, literally playing the planets, and in the blink of an eye, he was standing before a burning, searing sphere. He held the headless, mutilated body out toward the blaze. "You can regenerate from a single drop of blood?" he said coldly. "What if there isn't a drop left?" Lobo's head was only half regrown, a grotesque lower jaw and part of the crown. He sneered as best he could. His soul still existed, detached from his body, so he saw and felt everything through those senses. "No wonder whoever put out the bounty wanted you captured alive. Purple Lantern, you're tougher than they said, but it won't matter." He boasted about how even God and Satan supposedly feared his presence, bent on endless wandering because of his reputation. His arrogance lasted only until David hurled him. The wrecking force of the throw sent Lobo crashing into the sun's outer layers with a violent splash. The sun's gravity pulled him inward. At first, Lobo fought like a demon in boiling water, swimming, clawing for purchase in a roiling mass of plasma and energy where nothing could anchor. But the sun is not a body with edges or footholds. The harder he fought, the more he was drawn toward the core. As his head reformed almost entirely, a final thought flickered and then was extinguished when the sun consumed him. David waited, watching the gravitational readouts. Time stretched. Lobo didn't emerge. From the ways the field reacted, David was reasonably certain that the criminal's body had vaporized in the sun. "Is he dead?" Clark asked, catching up behind him. "Not necessarily," David replied, frowning. "Defeating him is one thing. Killing him, permanently, that's another. Even if the body's gone, his soul can possess others and come back." A prickling awareness crept over him. He felt watched. He scanned the surrounding space. On the far side of the moon, a skull-shaped ship sat in shadow. Brainiac? The thought hit him. The vessel's shape was unmistakably in that style, but something didn't add up. The landing marks around it were fresh. The ship had not been there long. As David brooded, several tiny satellites, camouflaged as drifting meteorites, fell into his line of sight. He incinerated them with beam after beam from his eyes. Clark looked at the moon, thinking for a moment Lobo might have resurfaced there, and saw the skull-shaped craft docked in the shadowed basin. Through his vision, he peered inside. 4 tall, humanoid figures stood in the ship's belly. Some looked grim, some hungry for a fight. All radiated a cold, predatory, murderous intent. "Someone's been monitoring us," Clark said. "Who are they?" David muttered, eyes narrowing. Chapter 180, Not Sure Who Is Whose Nightmare. "It's Brainiac's people. He put a bounty on us." David realized it the moment Lobo showed up. He hadn't made many enemies and lived. Among cosmic foes, there were only Parallax and Brainiac. Parallax wouldn't stoop to this. Brainiac would. When a Brainiac ship appeared in the solar system, his suspicion hardened into certainty. Brainiac himself wasn't aboard this time. The 4 beings inside the ship bled like rivers and radiated terrible power, but none of them carried Brainiac's cold, transcendent presence. Putting out a bounty, sending lackeys to get us and Lobo to beat each other up, then scooping us all in one net? David sneered, picturing Brainiac's typical scheme of turning one predator on another. Overman, Superman. Did Lobo's bike just fly off? "Everything all right over there?" Cyborg's voice crackled through the lantern ring. After David had rocketed toward the sun to try to use it against the immortal bounty hunter, Batman and the others had guessed his plan, use the star to burn someone who couldn't truly die, but they didn't know if it would work. Seeing Lobo's motorcycle take off, Cyborg warned them both. David glanced back at Earth. "He says he can't die even if he wanted to, but deep down he's afraid of death, right, Lobo?" His tone went cold. Riding a trail of light, shirtless but slipping his jacket back on, Lobo puffed on a cigar and scoffed. Old Lobo hadn't had enough fun yet. Endless cigars, endless babes, and he wasn't going anywhere. Clark's jaw tightened when he realized Lobo had hidden blood in his bike, a failsafe. The outlaw's voice rose into a taunt. "Round 2, you 2 brats. Taste Grandpa Lobo's wrath." Lobo drew an ion plasma gun, laughing as he charged and fired. Careful. The plasma seared Clark's arm. The heat was like being doused with scalding water. Clark warned David not to underestimate the weapon. "On Earth, you couldn't stand up to me. In space, you've got even less chance." David tilted his head, avoiding a blast, and spread out his palm to pull on the gravities between bodies. The immense field of attraction and repulsion he wove, Earth, Moon, and the Sun, slowed the light-speed bike to a crawl. "Not this again," Lobo roared. He hated being checked, and the idea of being killed without blood stung his vanity. "You haven't seen anything yet." David's eyes darkened. If Lobo was a cockroach, he had a plan for crushing him. The combined pull yanked the biker down toward the moon. Lobo was ripped off course and plummeted like a meteor, gouging a deep trench into the lunar surface. He and his prized bike were thrown apart, tens of meters away. Lobo scrambled for his wheels, but David intercepted and blasted him back with a focused energy strike. "Bastard! Old Lobo's about to regret this." Lobo scrambled up, jacket shredded, roaring. He punched and kicked like an enraged ape. From Earth to Moon, gravity hadn't slowed him. His blows were brutal and relentless. This universe's premier bounty hunter knew interstellar combat. Clark hovered, eyes scanning the horizon for trouble. Lobo was stronger than the League liked to admit, but the earlier fight on Earth had shown David was more than a match. What Clark feared more was the Brainiac crew that had just appeared, ready to ambush. Dust and rock erupted as David and Lobo clashed. Craters shattered with each collision. The moon itself seemed to tremble under their fight. Despite his fury, Lobo's speed and strength couldn't match David's edge. Bone and muscle gave way under precise, crushing blows. "You can't go to hell," David warned, "but you're about to get a taste of it." David seized Lobo's arm and drove his elbow down. Bone snapped. Lobo staggered, then his other limbs followed. David beat him like a sack, breaking arms and legs until the bounty hunter lay contorted on the regolith. Even blood spewing and spine shattered couldn't make Lobo beg. He lay flattened, grotesque, sneering through the pain. "Hit me harder. I'm almost bored." David stood him up, flipped him, and slammed him down while driving a knee through his back. Lobo's spine cracked, blood gushed from his mouth. He cried out, but his voice still had its defiant edge. "It's no use," David said. Thrown again into the crater, Lobo still laughed, mad and dangerous. "Even if you fling me into your sun, old Lobo will claw his way out somewhere and come back to this rock. From now on, you'll sleep with one eye open. I, Lobo, will be your nightmare." "It's not certain who will be whose nightmare," David replied, a humorless smile playing at his lips. Lobo, fierce and fearless, had no inkling of what David meant. Then the lantern ring on David's hand began to glow. Buzzing energy wrapped around Lobo and dragged him into the air, suspended spread-eagled like an animal on an operating table. Panic flared in the bounty hunter's wide eyes. With a snap of David's fingers, a green construct formed, first a dress, then layers of outfits, coaxing Lobo's massive body into embarrassingly coy poses. "No, no, what are you doing?" Lobo screamed, useless hands controlled to press politely at a skirt's hem as wind lifted it just so. David's constructs forced a smile, adjusted an expression, made him pose cute, coy, absurd. Lobo howled, part rage, part despair, while David, completely in control, condensed a camera from green light and photographed every humiliating angle. "This pose made a movie star famous in our world last century," David said dryly, clicking the shutter. "You'll pay for this. You're a devil. Kill me. Kill me." Lobo ranted and begged in the same breath, alternating threats with pleas. When David had enough humiliation, enough pictures, he made the camera vanish. He let Lobo slither down to the moon's surface, broken and furious. David held up the lantern ring, the green light spinning in his fist. "Mr. Tough Guy," he said softly. In Lobo's terrified eyes, David looked like something worse than a vengeance machine. "You don't want these photos circulating across the galaxy, do you?" David asked. The threat hung between them. The images would wreck the monster's reputation forever. Lobo's snarls dissolved into a choked, hateful silence as the implication sank in. He could regenerate from shredded flesh and broken bone, but reputation, especially for a legend who traded on fear and invincibility, was another kind of vulnerability. David's victory wasn't in gore or destruction today. It was in taking from Lobo what he cared about most and using it to bend him. In the silent crater, lit by the cold sunlight, a very different kind of nightmare had been delivered, one neither monster had expected.